Chapter 506. As the top holy sword of the Celtic gods, it wasn't difficult to injure Superman, especially when the other party's attacks were disorganized. Now that he was being controlled by the plant, it was impossible for Superman to attack. However, there was no kryptonite to degrade his cells. No matter how big of a wound Thea inflicted on him, Superman could immediately recover. With the energy in her body, coupled with the rapid growth of her cells and the assistance of the yellow sun, Thea circled Superman for a long time and found that the other party basically didn't lose any blood. Halfway through, Batman adjusted his armor and rejoined the battle. The black helmet and black armor looked extraordinary, but it was useless. Both of them were a little restrained when fighting in the city. They could only consciously lead Superman to the suburbs. Of course, the main credit was Batman. When the controlled Superman saw Batman, it was as if he saw the enemy who killed his father. He punched and kicked fiercely. If it wasn't for Batman's anti-Superman armor that was really thick, he might have died. When they reached the suburbs, Thea finally didn't have so many scruples. Her moves began to gradually become fierce. The sword attached with emotional energy cut a 20-centimeter long blood groove on Superman's left arm. The wound took a full minute to heal. Under the chain reaction, one of the tentacles of Black Mercy was directly cut off by the holy sword. Can this thing be cut to death like this? Batman's armor also had a similar X-ray equipment. Through the clothes, he saw that one of the tentacles of the plant on Superman's chest had withered and weathered. He asked curiously. Thea avoided answering. This holy sword also consumed a lot of energy. Cutting through the body of steel was no joke. After that, she followed the spiritual channel and mapped the wound to the plant's body. This use of energy could be said to be extremely ingenious. It was okay to do it occasionally, but it was too tiring to keep cutting like this. It wasn't difficult to guess that there would be a bigger battle later on. When she was dealing with Supergirl in the original timeline, this plant was like a dead corpse, lying on the host's chest. At that time, she didn't see that it had the ability to control the host's body, and Thea didn't think that this plant had any deep hatred for Batman. Considering that Supergirl's Uncle Norn's belongings had all fallen into Luthor's hands, it was almost certain that this Black Mercy had been given to Superman by Luthor. It was likely that Doomsday had already entered the countdown. Hold on a little longer. The reinforcements I called are almost here. Thea dodged Superman's frost breath, and Batman, who was controlling the anti-Superman armor, sent out a lot of sound waves, directly repelling Superman. Is it Diana? The anti-Superman armor kicked Superman away. No. It was useless to call Diana. Thea called Poison Ivy. Presumably, with her special ability, she could control this plant. In fact, the Frost Killer's ability to absorb heat had a miraculous effect on Kryptonians. Unfortunately, Caitlin still couldn't see the light of day. One of Black Mercy's tentacles was cut off, and its control over Superman was further weakened. Thea's mind control spell could now cause some delay and deceleration effects. Your armor is not bad. When did you develop it? Thea asked during the break. Batman was beating Superman loudly, but he pretended not to hear and avoided answering her question. He only knew how to beat up Superman on the ground. The two of them treated Superman like a sandbag on the ground for another 3 minutes before Poison Ivy finally arrived. Leaving aside Batman, who wanted to investigate a stranger's 8 generations of ancestors, Poison Ivy's expertise was unquestionable. She summoned a cactus-like plant from the void. Amidst the whirring sound, Superman staggered and fell from the sky as if he was drunk. After that, he completely lost his mind. Poison Ivy's expression was a little solemn. Her fingers touched Black Mercy on his chest. After a long while, she said, "Thea, this thing has been modified. It is not completely a plant now. It is very difficult for me to control it." Thea roughly checked it. It would take a lot of effort to completely remove it. Now that they were in the wilderness, it was not the place to chat. She could already see military satellites spying on Gotham. "Let's go to your bat cave first. My friend, Poison Ivy, is a trustworthy friend." Thea first asked Batman, and then briefly introduced her. Batman wanted to refuse, but he also knew that he still needed Poison Ivy's expertise. After a slight hesitation, he agreed. The armored Batman carried Superman on his back, and the three of them returned to the Batcave. The first thing they saw was a big hole in the wall. If they were not mistaken, this was the evidence of Superman's crime. Next, Thea saw Louise Lane, who had the ability to appear wherever danger was. The death-courting expert was helping to clear the rubble on the ground. According to Batman, Louise was learning basic fighting techniques from Barbara at the time. The golden armor that everyone bought, collectively made for her fitted her quite well. At this time, Louise and Barbara were lifting a cement pillar. Seeing them carry Superman in, Louise was shocked. How is Superman? He is fine. Thea was exhausted, and Batman beside her was bruised and swollen. Compared to his clothes that were a little damaged, Superman was indeed fine. After placing Superman on the platform, the few idlers in the Batcave gathered around. Batgirl Barbara, Huntress Helena, Nightwing Dick Grantham and his current girlfriend Princess Starfire, and finally the third-generation Red Robin, Tim Drake, whom Thea met for the first time. While Poison Ivy was checking, Batman briefly introduced everyone to Thea. Whether she knew them or not, at least they could be familiar with each other. Then, he talked about the surprise attack. In fact, there was not much to say. Superman's movements were too fast. There was very little time between when he was discovered by the skybase of the Watchtower and when he landed in the Batcave. If it weren't for the fact that Princess Starfire and Louise, who was wearing armor, had blocked the first two attacks, these ordinary superheroes, except for Batman, who had unparalleled evasion attributes, wouldn't be standing there in one piece. After that, Batman urgently activated the anti-Superman armor. However, there was no major conflict between this time and space, and Batman's armor was still some distance away from completion. It was not surprising that he was defeated in a hasty battle. I forcefully disconnected the mechanical part. I can only make this plant sleep. If you want to wake him up, he will have to rely on himself, Poison Ivy said helplessly after checking for a long time. What do you think? Batman asked Thea. After all, she was a medical giant. Collect his brainwaves, create a brainwave synchronizer, enter his space of consciousness, and wake him up. Thea told him the idea she had long thought of. Batman did not have a better idea. The two of them worked together, and in less than 10 minutes, a slightly crude but high-tech helmet appeared in front of everyone. Who would enter the space of consciousness to wake Superman up? A very serious problem was placed in front of them. Chapter 507. No matter what the enemy's plan is, I only know that he deliberately diverted Superman away. The Metropolis is in a critical situation now. I don't have much time, I have to go back immediately. Thea pointed to a few monitors in the Batcave. On the screen, the Metropolis had begun to lose power. Countless amounts of electricity had been diverted to a certain place. Thea felt that it might be Lex Luthor's underground base. Her reason was perfect. Even if Superman woke up now, he would let Thea go back to take care of the city first. Except for Poison Ivy, everyone present was a superhero. They could completely understand this choice. Let me do it, we are. Louise volunteered, but she was not sure if she should mention her relationship with Superman. Thea decided immediately. It's you. As for letting Batman wake up Superman, the scene was a little scary. Entering Superman's space of consciousness would definitely reveal a lot of secrets. Unless the Earth was on the verge of destruction, Batman would never open his mind and let others read his thoughts. Leaving Poison Ivy to help, Thea bade farewell and flew back to the Metropolis alone. With Superman's appearance, it was impossible to count on him to deal with Doomsday. As for Batman, how cruel it was to let an ordinary person like him be a bystander. Thea contacted Diana and Supergirl on the way. With the strength of the three girls, they could even kill the Apocalypse Star, let alone a well-prepared Doomsday. In such a place where thousands of people were watching, she used her real identity to fight bravely, win the trust of all humans, and gain willpower. This was the main reason why she ignored Luthor's little tricks for so long. After entering the Metropolis airspace, she found that there was still some time. She hid the god's armor and put away the holy sword. Her eyes were constantly looking for abnormalities. At this time, it was close to evening. The large shortage of electricity made the city dark. From time to time, pedestrians on the streets and alleys called the police for help. Some sensitive citizens felt the calm before the storm and hid in their homes with guns in their hands. Not long after, Thea found traces of a battle at the edge of the city. Both sides of the battle were almost completely wiped out. One side was an active soldier in military uniform, while the other side was a lone weak woman, Luther's secretary, Miss Maisie. This secretary was really fierce. She was no different from an ordinary person without any enhancements. She had taken out 19 fully armed American soldiers by herself. The main reason she was injured was because the shrapnel from a grenade had cut her abdomen. She had lost a lot of blood, and her speed was getting slower and slower. When Thea arrived, she found that she had been shot at least 6 times, but she was still breathing. Is it worth sacrificing so much for Luther? Thea was very puzzled. With Merce's qualifications, she had the looks and the ability. As a modern person, Thea actually saw the spirit of an ancient death warrior in her. This made Thea a little moved. Unfortunately, the secretary was on her deathbed, so it was impossible for her to answer her question. Thea sighed. If it were an uncle or an aunt lying in a pool of blood, she would have walked over directly. However, the secretary was really beautiful and had a good figure. It was a pity that she died here. Looking into the depths, Thea felt that there was still some time before the birth of Doomsday. She helped the secretary back to her laboratory first. She put her into the top black technology medical cabin that had previously treated the Frost Killer. The cabin door was closed, and she performed CPR and a large amount of blood transfusion. After that, she began to remove the shrapnel and suture the wound. However, Miss Maisie was still seriously injured. She was just an ordinary person, and it was already a sign of her tenacity to be able to hold on until she could treat her. Thea was not in a hurry to wake her up. She set the dormant program and sank her into the ground with the medical cabin. The battle with Doomsday would cause another catastrophe in Metropolis. Her laboratory was not safe. If the laboratory was exposed to the public because of the upcoming battle, some dangerous experimental data and experimental samples would flow into the hands of ordinary people. It would be very troublesome. A large amount of data was backed up. Some dangerous samples, such as Mungo's cells, Doomsday's cells, and Kryptonian cells, were all sunk deep underground. Until there were no more mistakes, she rushed to the previous area and continued to search for Luther's traces. Along the way, the corpses of the military soldiers and mercenaries served as road signs for her. Thea walked into the depths of the underground base. She was very fast. Many people only saw a blur in front of their eyes before she disappeared. Looking at the experimental equipment and documents scattered everywhere along the way, Thea could not help but sigh. Luther had really spent a lot of money to dig out such a large underground project, coupled with the dazzling array of rare materials and equipment here. And with such a big movement, it would be a big joke if the military and government did not know about it. Looking at how the military had arrived at the scene one step ahead of her, she knew that they had a tacit understanding. Today, whether they were here to reap the benefits or to stop Luther's evil deeds, the key was to see who would be the final winner. After breaking through the largest battlefield at high speed and entering the deepest part of the base, Thea finally found the target of her trip, Mr. Luther, who had recently lost a lot of hair. Standing in front of him was also an old acquaintance of Thea's, the old General Ryan, who also had the ability to appear wherever there was danger. Of course, these high-ranking people were not here alone. Standing beside Luther was a burly man nearly 2 meters tall. Under Thea's supervision, this man's whole body was made of metal, and there was a large piece of kryptonite placed on his chest where his heart was. This was one of Superman's nemeses, the Metal Man. Next to General Ryan stood a tall robot with a red body, a big T symbol on his chest, and a blue cape. This was the superhero, Red Whirlwind. Thea just glanced at him casually. The black technology of the military was still very commendable. This guy's bionic skin was not bad, but it was hard to tell whether he was an artificial intelligence or not. However, the other party seemed to feel Thea's gaze and turned to look at her with a stern expression. "Yo, both of you are here. There's a power outage in our house. May I ask what caused it?" The young lady did not intend to hide her whereabouts. She stood up calmly and asked a completely unrelated question. Dr. Quinn came quickly. Is Superman okay? General Ryan did not appreciate her humor, but Luther did not take it seriously. He greeted her briskly and asked about Superman's recent situation like a friend. Ah. Thea glanced at the old man next to her. She did not dare to say that his daughter was now awakening the sleeping Prince Charming in Superman's dream. Oh, what a sincere feeling. Luther seemed to have analyzed something from her subtle expression. He nodded gently and said something that General Ryan didn't understand, but Dr. Quinn's behavior today is very strange. You're standing here as if nothing has happened. Don't you plan to continue hiding behind the scenes? Like your female companion, you were also left behind by the ancient gods to protect the earth, right? Luther's tone was still brisk, with a bit of banter and seriousness. Chapter 508. Horus, Apollo, Jehovah, these gods are real. Who else is included? Diana Prince. What role does Professor Quinn play in this? Luther looked at Thea with curiosity. Thea didn't need to lie about this topic. Besides, other than Jehovah, who Luther mentioned, she knew all the other gods. Now that she was on good terms with Hera, Thea didn't hesitate to use the excuse. Just because you can't see them doesn't mean they don't exist. Gods do exist, and they have been silently protecting this world. Thea saw that Luther was about to speak, so she interrupted him. I know what you want to say. Let me tell you, they are not perfect. They have their own ideas and their own positions. Gods are not omnipotent, so they can't be perfect. I'm not a god, I'm just an ordinary person. Ryan looked at her. You're still on our side, aren't you? Thea nodded. She was on the same side as the military when it came to stopping Luther. It was a bit narrow-minded to say that she was on the military's side. She should be on the side of order. General, I'm on the same side as you now, but I've warned you many times that Brainiac's threat still exists. Don't develop artificial intelligence. You're risking the lives of 7 billion people on Earth. Don't tell me that the one beside you is just a robot. Ryan didn't say anything. Instead, the robot beside him said, I'm Red Whirlwind. My core command is to protect humanity. Professor Quinn, we're not enemies. Thea didn't comment. You'll get into big trouble, but I'll still help you today. Young mistress did not mention anything about her own artificial intelligence. She pushed this idea to the extreme. First, she stood at the top of the human race and used righteousness to make the military suffer. Any problems that happened in the future would be their fault. Ryan's idea was to ignore it. He didn't care about the future. He had to get through today first. The few people who were secretly monitoring Luther reported that the man's energy reaction was far beyond their calculations. After several failed negotiations, the military was forced to take the risk and bring the latest robot to capture him. Unfortunately, they were still one step too late. The incubation pool in front of them was different from the swimming pool in the movies. It was as big as a football field. The water in the pool was undulating under the dim light. A translucent fetal membrane was slowly floating up, and 2 arms could be vaguely seen struggling inside. Haha, I don't care if you are a god or not. I only know that the time for humans to get rid of the old era and get rid of you useless gods has finally come. This is Karl Ayre's doomsday, and yours as well. Luther's mental state was a little messed up. He opened his hands as if he was announcing the results of a trial. Stop him. General Ryan only felt that the danger warning in his heart was incomparably clear. He hurriedly gave the order to Red Tornado. Thea snorted. What were you guys doing earlier? Why are you in such a hurry now? It was too late. However, she still cancelled her transformation and revealed a silver-white armor. She held a long sword and pretended to charge forward. Red Tornado had the ability to control the wind. It was extremely fast. When Thea deliberately went easy on it, it charged directly at Luther, trying to capture the leader first. The metal man, who had a metal skeleton and a kryptonite heart, blocked the red whirlwind. The 2 inhuman creatures attacked each other at high speed. The red whirlwind was much faster than the metal man, but the metal man's strong defense also caused him to be slightly injured. Thea directly knocked Luther down and threw him to Old Man Ryan. She looked not far away with a serious expression. Doomsday had finally arrived. Ancient deformed creatures of Krypton. Look, this is the harbinger of the coming darkness. Luther was knocked to the ground by General Ryan in a few moves. He didn't feel anything as he roared like a madman. Run, take your people and run. Sia turned around and shouted, then ignored them. She held her sword with both hands and was ready for battle. At this time, Doomsday gave her the feeling that he was more powerful than Horus when he descended in his true form. Although they were in different realms and had different names, in a sense, Doomsday could be considered a true god, and a true god in his prime. Thea did not hesitate. She was not stupid enough to wait for Doomsday to fully emerge before fighting. She gathered all the magic in her body. The divine puppet armor converted a large amount of lightning magic. Thea attached all the magic to her holy sword. She jumped high and slashed at Doomsday. A large amount of lightning hit Doomsday's membrane. Doomsday also realized the urgency of the situation and frantically tore at the membrane. Finally, at the moment when the lightning hit his body, he stretched out two giant claws and forcibly blocked the holy sword. The power of life and hope collided with the power of death and destruction. The first collision of the two almost opposite forces ended with Thea's victory. One of Doomsday's left hands was cut off at the wrist. His body, which was already half standing, was pushed back into the pool by the strong impact. In order to pretend that she did not know, Thea could not immediately take out her Krypton weapon. It would be too fake to end the battle in 3 seconds. In order to receive more praise and power after the battle, she had to fight a few rounds with this big guy. She even had to let it level up a few times. She did not care about how disgusting the sticky liquid in the pool was. She directly jumped into it and slashed at Doomsday's head. Clang! In less than 30 seconds, Doomsday had completed a level up. His left hand grew back, and his strength and speed increased greatly at the same time. He swung his hand and sent Thea flying. The 10-meter-tall monster finally revealed its true appearance. It had an ugly appearance. There was not a single strand of hair on its head. The ratio of its head to its body was a little deformed. Its muscles were abnormally swollen, and there was a layer of faintly discernible bone armor on top of its skin. The tall Doomsday roared loudly. The entire underground facility was shaken by the sound waves. The two sides fighting simultaneously stopped attacking. Oh my God! The metal man forced the red whirlwind to retreat. It was only then that he saw the monster behind him. With the energy detector, he screamed and did not care about Luther anymore. He rushed to the other side of the tunnel and ran. General Lane did not have an energy detector. However, after many years of military service, he still had some warnings in times of crisis. When he thought of the few big bosses who asked him to bring back Luther's research results, he could only smile bitterly. Are you kidding me? Can I bring back this big monster? Especially when he saw that Thea was about to collapse. His heart turned cold. He grabbed Luther's neck and ran out. I order you to come with me, he said to the red whirlwind, who was in a daze. I refuse your order. My mission is to protect humans. This monster is too strong. I have to help that woman. After he finished speaking, he did not care about General Lane anymore. His body turned into a whirlwind and rushed towards Doomsday. Chapter 509. Damn it, what happened to obeying orders and listening to commands? Lane was extremely dissatisfied with the artificial intelligence that the military had invented. He agreed with Thea's repeated warnings about not developing artificial intelligence. However, he had no time to think about it. He could only run outside with Luther. As Louise's father, he was more or less related to Superman, the son of the dimension. He was quite lucky. He saw a group of soldiers after running for a while. A few soldiers realized that he was a high-ranking military official. They hesitated for a while but still brought him along to escape. General Lane was running for his life. With the help of Red Whirlwind, Thea was no longer in a hurry. However, this robot was still far from their level. It could only hold Doomsday back. It would take at least 100 of them to defeat him. What's the situation over there? Only the Martian hunter could communicate telepathically. Thea and Doomsday had left the underground base long ago. Her blonde hair was covered in dust. It's bad. Why, do you want to help? The Martian hunter hesitated for a while but decided to tell the truth. Your side is on fire. I can't help. Where's Superman? In the Batcave. You can ask Batman for the details. I'm too busy here. Thea only relaxed a little. Red Whirlwind was severely injured by Doomsday's heat ray. 2 large holes appeared on the left side of its chest. Its bionic organs were destroyed. Its body could no longer maintain its high-speed rotation. It fell to the ground like a rag. Fortunately, it was a robot. It was the last on Doomsday's list to be destroyed. Seeing Thea charging at him again, Doomsday, who was a little slow, instinctively let Red Whirlwind go. The huge disadvantage in terms of size made Thea feel very aggrieved. She no longer cared about the consumption of emotional energy, and a 10-meter-tall manifestation that looked exactly like her was created by her. The 10-meter-tall giant also held an enlarged holy sword. Under Doomsday's surprised gaze, it quickly moved left and right. It found an opening and slashed Doomsday's abdomen horizontally. A large amount of dark, blood-like liquid flowed out. Doomsday cried out in pain. Thea's experiment was not in vain. Its cells could not simulate the holy sword at all. This kind of fantasy weapon was its real enemy. It jumped wildly, lifted a tall building beside it, and threw it at Thea. Nowadays, whether it was the satellites in space, the drones not far away, or the helicopters, there were many people watching the live broadcast. If it were any other time, she would have avoided them directly, but now she had to act righteous. He set up a thick defense in front of his body. On the other side, he used emotional energy to envelop the tall building to create an emergency ladder so that the people inside could quickly come out. Fortunately, at the critical moment, her reinforcements finally arrived. With a huge sonic boom, Kara Danvers rushed behind Doomsday. With the help of the huge acceleration, she punched Doomsday in the head. Supergirl, who had trained many times, calculated her position very well. Doomsday was hit towards the side where there were fewer people. However, it was impossible for him to come out unscathed. It was a miracle that such a 10-meter-tall monster with a weight of tons was sent flying with 0 casualties. Thea put down the lucky people she had saved. She was afraid that Supergirl would think too much and affect her combat ability, so she quickly chased after her. Why did you call Kara too? She's still a child. Where's Diana? The Martian hunter, who was full of fatherly love, immediately expressed his dissatisfaction. Thea did not spoil him. Diana is on her way. Besides, I'm only 2 years older than her. Thank you, I'm a child too. Either you come and help, or you go and help Superman. After being hit by Supergirl's attack, Doomsday began to evolve again. His body was surrounded by a large amount of electric arcs. Some orange energy could be vaguely seen in his body. The bone armor on his skin began to expand rapidly, and a few large bone spikes emerged from his body. The most shocking thing was that Doomsday had a bone spur on each side of his fist. Just by looking at its sharpness and hardness, one could tell that it could not be blocked directly. When Doomsday saw Supergirl, it was as if some program had been activated. He fought with the 2 girls, and most of his killing moves were used on Supergirl. This made the little girl a little tired. Son of a bitch, how dare you ignore me? Thea jumped out of the battle circle. Her hands kept drawing complicated patterns in the air, and she began to chant an awkward spell. After that, she took out the God of Death staff. After a full 15 seconds, she released the spell. A grey-white ray directly hit Doomsday. Aging spell. Everything had a limit. Thea's research showed that Doomsday's cells also had a limit, but it was a mixture of wills. It was not clear at a glance like an ordinary person. Ordinary people, whether young, middle-aged or old, could be easily distinguished. An ordinary person could be seen as a whole. However, Doomsday was an aggregate. His will was a mixture of wills. Some of the cells in his body were in a state of life, while others were in a state of death due to energy exhaustion. These dead cells were then swallowed to give birth to new cells, so it created the illusion that Doomsday had an endless supply of energy. Thea's method was to attack Doomsday from the source. She cut off the growth rate of all the cells. Cells that could divide 100 times were completely dead under the effect of aging spell. Her spell was directly effective. Doomsday began to roar. Unfortunately, Supergirl's attacks were still sharp. The speed of his cell loss began to increase. A large amount of dead skin and rotten flesh were abandoned by the main body. His original height of 10 meters shrank to 8 meters before he could stabilize himself. He wanted to enter another round of evolution. Unfortunately, the foundation of his cells was exhausted. He tried several times, but it ended in failure. This guy has become weak. Supergirl did not know how many experiments Thea had done for this aging spell. She also understood the principle of beating a drowning dog. She raised her slender fist and hit Doomsday's bald head. Thea also controlled the manifestation and began to chase after Doomsday. According to her calculations, the aging period was not long. As a biological weapon of Krypton, although she had not seen spells before, many principles were similar. The information engraved in Doomsday's genes would help him find a new way out. As expected, Doomsday began to shrink in size while the two of them were beating each other up. Doomsday retracted the bone spikes that were originally exposed on its body. A large number of new cells entered the circulation of his body. His vitality was rejuvenating in a way that one after the other. Doomsday was like a precise machine. He kept extracting the energy contained in each cell. After that, he swallowed and reorganized to give birth to new cells. In less than a minute, he had stopped his decline. His body recovered slightly and he made corresponding adjustments. Chapter 510. In order to prevent Thea's next aging spell, Doomsday evolved a thick layer of cuticle on the surface of his skin. Countless dead cells were recycled and piled up on the surface of his body layer by layer. A primitive version of the magic barrier was created and wrapped around him like a thick armor. Thea cast 2 more aging spells, but the effect was worse than the previous one. This was something that was not seen in the laboratory. In the laboratory, she could only study individual cells. She did not expect Doomsday to use such a stupid method to resist her magic. However, regardless of whether it was stupid or not, Doomsday did resist her magic. To some extent, it was quite efficient. Doomsday deserved the title of the strongest Krypton biochemical weapon. Fortunately, Thea had more than one backup plan. Her reinforcements were still arriving. Diana, who was wearing the champion's armor and a red cape with golden edges, and holding a sword and shield, finally arrived after Doomsday evolved again. After being beaten up by Thea for half a day, Doomsday's attack and defense now had some moves. At least he would not stupidly use his arm to block the holy sword. Facing Diana, who was also skilled in her moves, Doomsday did not take it head-on. He grabbed Thea's cape and threw her away. At the same time, he lowered his head to dodge Thea's holy sword. He reached out to grab the truck on the ground and sent Diana flying horizontally. The 3 girls usually fought against each other, but this was the first time they fought together against an enemy. Slowly, they began to cooperate. The 3 of them surrounded Doomsday and attacked him fiercely. Among the 3 girls, Supergirl was still the strongest, especially after she absorbed 30% of Apollo's energy. Now, in terms of pure strength, she was not inferior to Superman, who had been under the sun for 30 years. Diana's attack and defense were equal. Her attack and defense were both excellent. She was a natural warrior. Thea's attack was a little weaker. The Sword of Victory and Oath was a fantasy weapon, not a weapon that specialized in killing people. In addition, she did not have a very aggressive personality, so she seemed a little weak. However, this was all relative. From the combined strength of the 3, Diana was still slightly stronger, Thea was slightly weaker, and Supergirl was at the bottom. Realizing that he was outnumbered, Doomsday circulated the energy in his body at full force. The heat rays from the Kryptonian genes surged wildly. 2 crimson rays shot straight at Supergirl's face. Not to be outdone, Supergirl also retaliated with heat rays. Thea felt that the timing was not bad. She also joined the game of killing whoever she glared at. Dark green energy shot towards Doomsday together with Supergirl. Doomsday had the upper hand against a Supergirl, but with Thea's addition, he immediately shrank back. It was still the same statement. Its strength was very strong, stronger than any of the three of them, but it was not to the extent where it could crush them. Diana naturally would not let go of such a good opportunity. She quickly moved behind Doomsday. The Valkyrie shouted loudly, and the Guardian bracelet combined with her own strength was activated dozens of times. The silver-white energy hit Doomsday's back directly. Even with the Kryptonian genes as a cushion, he could not withstand such a powerful blow. The moment he was sent flying, Thea and Supergirl's laser attacks hit him at the same time. The three women's strength coordinated very well. Originally, Thea and Supergirl's laser attacks and Diana's attacks were directed at the same direction. However, when Thea saw that Diana's attack was effective, her laser with tracking function wrapped around Supergirl's attack and went half a circle around Doomsday's chest directly. Doomsday, who had regained his 10-meter height, was directly sent out of the atmosphere by the three women's joint attack. If nothing went wrong, he would evolve again. Before she could catch her breath, Thea dialed the president's number. When the call went through, she did not bother to talk nonsense. "Where are your nuclear bombs? Now is a good opportunity. Hurry up and launch them." There was a lot of discussion on the other side of the phone. Thea continued to urge, "Hurry up, now. He will recover soon." In fact, Thea knew that nuclear bombs were useless against Doomsday. They could even trigger a new round of evolution. However, if she did not let the people of Earth experience it, they would not know how to write the word give up. At the same time, she wanted them to throw the nuclear bombs out so that they would not backstab them later. As long as they realized that nuclear bombs were useless, they would place their hopes on her and the others. Just as she expected, in less than a minute, a flaming missile carrying a nuclear warhead was launched into the sky. Afraid that it was not safe, another one was launched 10 seconds later. Did it succeed? This thought appeared in the minds of many high-ranking officials. If Thea knew what they were thinking, she would definitely despise them. This was not the end of it. It was just a halftime break. In the movies, Doomsday was almost instantaneous in order to make the camera feel more compact. In reality, it was impossible to achieve such an exaggerated level. Basic biological cell evolution required time. Doomsday was a technological product, not a magical product. Thea contacted the Martian hunter who had been on the telepathic channel. "How is Superman? This big monster seems to be not dead yet." The Martian hunter's voice was a little weak. "He woke up. He imagined a Krypton environment. We spent a lot of effort to wake him up. I will pull him in. You can ask him yourself." Not long after, the voice of Superman, who was even weaker, came. "I saw your battle. Hang in there, I will be there soon." Thea stretched her neck and looked for a long time, but she did not see Superman, who was coming soon. "Don't look, he is on my bat plane. Can't your yellow ring restore him? Why don't you fly towards me?" Batman's voice came at the right time. If it were not for the fact that he did not have any special abilities, Thea would have suspected that he also had supervision. The three girls agreed to go together. The three of them had good eyesight. Doomsday did not die after the nuclear explosion, but he was too severely injured. The cell repair in his body was a little slow, but the interval was very short. They were afraid that they would have to fight a stronger version of Doomsday in a few minutes. On the way, Thea received a call from the president. Ordinary people did not have supervision, but they had many observation satellites. Doomsday's body did not explode into powder. Instead, his cells began to repair the damage. He was rejuvenating. Anyone with a little common sense could analyze that he was not dead at all. "What should we do?" Thea smiled bitterly. "Mr. President, continue to launch. Help us buy time. Previously, Luthor seriously injured Superman. We need time to heal Superman. I don't know if there is a tomorrow for mankind. Let's work together to get through this." Thea's words were very emotional, but a pessimistic atmosphere shrouded the White House through the phone. The president almost smashed the phone. He pointed at the noses of the high-ranking military officials and scolded, Is this what you mean by everything is under control? Did Luther say anything? He created this thing. Does it have any weaknesses? Can you take pity on me and tell me? Chapter 5:11. The generals were also staring at each other. One of the oldest replied, "I'm sorry, Mr. President. We have used many methods, including deep hypnosis. From the analysis of the current clues, I'm afraid Luther has created an invincible monster. Now that the situation is serious, I'm afraid we need your help." The president's finger trembled as he pointed at him. He was so angry that he could not speak. These people were such bastards. Usually, they would hide their true intentions and cause trouble. Now that they realized that the situation was too big to handle, they dragged him out to take the blame. God had mercy on him. Usually, he would have left work at this time. Now that the sky was dark, he still had to sit here and argue with these useless people. You have seen the effect of the nuclear bomb. Now, what other ideas do you have? Tell me and I'll carry them out. The president had no binding power over this group of people, nor did he have any punishment measures. He could only vent his dissatisfaction with his mouth. After that, he would have to clean up this mess himself. He suppressed the thought of using his submachine gun to attack these generals and turned to ask the think tanks. At this time, everyone was speechless. What could they do against such a terrifying monster? They all lowered their heads and did not make a sound. We have been reduced to the point where we have to rely on 3 women to save our lives. Gentlemen, where are our male superheroes? The president pointed at the TV screen angrily. Where is Superman? What other Batman is there? Where are these people? Commander Amanda. The president turned to ask Amanda and found that she did not look good. He immediately realized that there was something wrong with his words. I'm sorry, I'm not discriminating against men and women. I don't know what I should say. Thankfully, Amanda was very patriotic and automatically ignored the issue of discrimination between men and women. Like a robot, she reported, Superman was heavily injured by Luther earlier. As for Batman, he's just an ordinary person. He can only provide limited help in a battle of this level. Luther again. The president wanted to eat him. He slammed the table and shouted, "Bring Luther here." Seeing that the president was about to explode, the whole White House echoed with his voice, "Bring him here. Bring him here." No one dared to provoke him. In less than 3 minutes, Luther was brought to the White House. Mr. Luther did not have the consciousness of a prisoner at all. He even expressed his views on the layout of the White House from an architectural perspective. The president was so angry that he wanted to shoot him. Weakness. Luther looked at the president as if he was looking at a mentally retarded child. He pointed at the images of Thea and the others on the television. These people all have weaknesses. Their families and their relationships are all weaknesses. As for the doomsday that I created, it is perfect. There are no emotions, no good and evil. Naturally, there are no weaknesses. Unfortunately, most of the politicians in the room were involved in law, sociology, and other subjects. They did not understand Luther's theological and critical views at all. The only thing he understood was that Thea and the others had a weakness, but the monster that wanted to destroy Earth had no weakness. The news was terrible. The president had no choice but to call Sia again. Sia poured another round of bitter water for him. Her acting skills were superb. She described how Day of Destruction became more and more courageous as it fought and how it could not be killed. In short, the enemy was too powerful. They had better pray quickly. Luther, who did not know how to spell the word death, was overjoyed when he heard her praise Day of Devastation as if his own child had been praised. This deepened the shadow in everyone's hearts. They really prayed according to Thea's instructions. They prayed that the earth would spin faster. If Day of Devastation jumped down again, it would be best if it landed in another country. At this time, Thea did not know about their wishful thinking. She, Diana, and Supergirl met the Batfighter directly. They saw the dispirited Superman and took out the light ring to help him replenish his energy. Supergirl also took out the artifact that Hero gave her and injected pure solar energy into Superman's body. With the efforts of the two and Superman's self-healing, he finally recovered some energy and flew out of the Batfighter. This made Thea feel a little relieved. After all, a Superman in a Batfighter to participate in the battle was too scary. In order to take care of Batman, they landed on the ground and began to discuss. It seems like the enemy is still alive. Superman finally had the time to look up at the sky. In the original timeline, he had only been hit by one nuclear bomb. Now, he had been hit by more than 10 bombs consecutively. With Day of Devastation's cell reproduction speed, it took him a lot of time to repair his body. Yes, the enemy is getting stronger and stronger. At first, I was able to fight it to a draw. Now, the three of us have to work together to barely suppress it. The enemy's cell reproduction speed is very fast. Its cells. Thea made a long story short. She briefly told the two of them about some of the information she had analyzed through the battle. Halfway through, they had another call with the White House. Luthor told them everything he knew and explained the process of his experiment. To him, showing off his talent was the most important thing. Kryptonite. Batman and Superman realized Day of Devastation's weakness at the same time through Luthor's explanation. At the critical moment of their discussion, they saw something that looked like a meteor crashing towards the ground. Everyone's prayers were completely in vain. The enemy's target was still Metropolis. Day of Devastation is back. You guys go get the kryptonite. We'll stop it. Thea finished speaking and went up with the two girls. Superman wanted to help, but his body was too exhausted. Currently, he had only regained his mobility. He said to Batman, "You go get the kryptonite. I'm going to the star to recover my strength." After that, he flew towards the sun. On Thea's side, the three of them faced Day of Devastation again. It was unknown how many times this guy had leveled up. Day of Devastation had been hit by nuclear bombs several times. Now, its energy level had exceeded the strongest point in the original timeline. It was showing signs of losing control of its energy. Huge orange electric arcs kept appearing around its body. Sia's materialized chains were broken, and the heat ray forced Diana to retreat. Doomsday also sent Supergirl flying during the exchange of attacks. Day of Devastation's energy level had surpassed the three of them. It was starting to crush them. The three of them went from suppressing Day of Devastation to restraining him. Day of Devastation, who was getting crazier and crazier, began to destroy the city. The military was not doing nothing. Dozens of fighter jets launched fierce attacks. Unfortunately, if it was in the early stages, their missiles might have had some effect. However, against Day of Devastation, who had leveled up many times, they could not do any damage. The fighter jets were destroyed like toys by Day of Devastation. The only good news was that they moved the battlefield to the outskirts. It was not like in the movies, where they did not cause too much damage to the city. Diana used the power of the silver bracelet to block the heat rays with both hands. She bought some time for Thea. Holding the Sword of Victory and Oath, Thea did not prepare to use her kryptonite weapon. She was going to use the full power of the Holy Sword to test Day of Devastation's defense. Chapter 512. The Holy Sword was infused with her magic, and the bright light of the sword shot into the sky. The light of the night was scattered by the light of the sword, and it was as if there was a bright moon in the night sky. Many scenes appeared in the minds of those who saw or did not see this scene. There were beautiful memories, and naturally, there were painful pasts. Anger, greed, fear, courage, hope, pity, love, and countless other emotions were finally gathered into a beam of light. Thea felt that the holy sword in her hand was tens of thousands of pounds, and she was about to reach her limit. She knew that the holy sword could hold more, but she could not hold on until then. She gave Diana a look, and the two of them cooperated very well. Thea stepped on Diana's knees and flew onto the shield. The Valkyrie roared, and the power of the silver bracelet was fully activated. Thea used the shield and her own strength to fly directly towards Doomsday. "Go to hell, monster!" In fact, it did not matter what she shouted, but she had to shout. Thea also pretended to be a hot-blooded anime protagonist. She held the sword with both hands, and the tip of the sword flashed with an obscure light. The holy shield kept increasing her speed, and Thea felt that she was in a better state than ever. She was confident that this sword would definitely hit its target, and it would definitely cause irreparable damage to Doomsday. Doomsday, who was made up of countless consciousness, seemed to have a premonition that a disaster was coming. However, it was not a unified entity, and its success and failure were chaotic. At this critical moment, its chaotic and crazy nature took over, and this irrational action directly pushed it into the abyss. Doomsday roared loudly, and chose to take the sword head-on. Its right fist had undergone a small evolution. Originally, there was only one thick bone spur. Now, it was covered by all kinds of ferocious bones. Its entire arm had a grey color, and orange energy was crazily flowing into its arm. The distance between them was getting closer and closer, and Thea began the final acceleration. The manifestation of emotions provided her with new motivation, and her speed increased by 10%. Her sudden acceleration caught Doomsday off guard. It did not have time to think, and could only swing its fist slightly passively. This punch did not fully utilize its strength, but Thea did not intend to give it a fair chance to fight. Thea knew that she had won the moment the light from the tip of her sword collided with Doomsday's bone armor. Thea's indestructible bone armor disappeared under the illusion of all living beings. The enormous energy of Doomsday only slowed down Thea's movements for a moment before it was swept away by her enormous light energy. Boom! The collision of the two caused a powerful explosion, and a huge sonic boom resounded through the night sky. The shockwave swept up countless debris in all directions. Supergirl relied on her own body to withstand the impact, while Diana flew to Thea's side to help her block the aftershock. Bah! Thea's face was covered in dust. Fortunately, this set of armor made by Zeus had a dust removal spell. Otherwise, her image would be ruined. Diana's armor had a similar effect, but Supergirl did not. She looked like a refugee from a certain country, but the little girl was in good spirits. Her eyes were constantly looking for traces of the enemy in the smoke. Thea did not have such good physical strength. This attack had almost exhausted all of her magic and emotional energy. The light ring could be recharged, but it would take at least a few days for her magic to fully recover. She stood up with the help of the holy sword. She had a hunch that Doomsday would be in a worse state if she was already in such a state. Supergirl cheeks puffed up and used her frost breath to disperse the smoke. Not only them, but the few people in the White House, and even the observant people who controlled the satellites to monitor the area, all saw Doomsday's miserable state. His right fist and his entire arm had completely disappeared. The huge energy impact had blown up a small part of the right side of his body. Losing his balance, he tried several times before he could stand up. The power of the Holy Sword was beyond the limit of cell simulation. Perhaps the Kryptonian scientists back then could not imagine the concept of a fantasy weapon. Doomsday, who fully embodied the essence of science and technology, was severely injured by this attack. The most serious thing was that no matter how hard he tried, the cells could not find a way out. The cells kept trying to grow in the direction of the damaged limb, but they all failed. It was as if he was originally a one-armed creature. Let me end it. Diana handed the powerless seer over to Supergirl to take care of and threw away her sword and shield. She made a great decision and decided to reveal her trump card. She finally unlocked the Guardian bracelet. This defensive artifact that she had worn on her arm since she was born finally fell to the ground with a bang. Her white fists clenched together. The energy in Diana's body was like a sudden flood that could not be stopped. The energy in her body exploded, causing the surrounding weather to change. The accumulation of thousands of years of divine power was a terrifying number that could not be calculated. The terrible energy that should have been on the firstborn's head turned a corner and fell on Doomsday's head. Thea wanted to stop it at first, but she gave up after thinking about it. Accumulating this energy for a long time would not do her much good. Doomsday would probably be her biggest enemy in the next 2 years. It was not a bad thing to let Diana vent her anger. If Doomsday could read minds and speak, he would definitely curse. It was easy to talk while standing. What was not a bad thing? This was so bad. Diana, who directly used a big move, naturally attracted his attention. This power that even the gods had to retreat made Doomsday tremble a little. Especially now that he was severely injured by Miss Thea, he did not even have a good balance. In the face of Diana's attack that almost broke the air, he could only stagger and use his left hand to block it. At this time, the energy skyrocketed. His hair was completely scattered, and his eyes turned golden. Doomsday's counterattack was weak and ridiculous in Diana's eyes. Pushing away the opponent's counterattack, Diana was like a divine punishment from heaven. She punched Doomsday's ugly and deformed head. Then she quickly turned behind him and raised Doomsday with both hands. The golden energy surged and she hit his waist hard with her knee. Crack! With a loud explosion, Doomsday's waist was broken. Although his body cells were recovering rapidly, he could not stand up in a short time. The political leaders and superheroes of various countries who could see this scene cheered. Batman naturally felt a chill in his back and subconsciously covered his old waist. Diana was a warrior, not a knight. It was impossible for her to let the opponent go just because he could not stand up. Her whole body was shining with golden light. She was like a tiger coming down the mountain, punching and kicking Doomsday. Doomsday, who never knew what failure was stunned. Diana's short burst of energy exceeded his current limit. Doomsday's destruction was in front of him. Chapter 5:13. The officials in the White House cheered when they saw this scene. A terrible crisis seemed to be turning around, which made them secretly happy. Ordinary people had nothing. If they died, so be it. They were different. In order to climb to their current position, they had sacrificed many things. If they were killed by some killing monster, they would feel wronged no matter how they thought about it. Now, the big monster was about to be killed by the heroes. Although these heroes' abilities were a little unusual, they could still communicate. The people represented by the president had already started to think about the future from a political point of view. The only person in the White House who was unhappy was Luther. How is this possible? Doomsday is going to lose. They're actually so powerful. As he spoke, Luther did not treat himself as an outsider. He casually took a piece of paper from the president's desk and lowered his head to calculate. We still need to evolve as a whole 3 times before we can defeat this woman. Luther felt that he had lost a bunch of hair as he muttered to himself. What the hell? This thing can continue to evolve. The officials who were thinking from a political point of view immediately shrank back and looked at the problem from a human survivor's point of view. What are we waiting for? Let's kill it quickly. The president had lost count of how many times he had spoken to Thea today. Previously, Thea's phone was damaged in the battle. After all, her blue battle armor was impressive, but Zeus did not design a place for a phone on the battle armor. Naturally, she could only use it whenever she wanted to. Now, every time she used a phone, it was sent to her by FBI agents who risked their lives. It was really not the time to talk nonsense. The president only briefly asked about Thea's injuries before bringing up the problem of how to kill Doomsday. Luther said that this thing will be invincible after 3 more evolutions. Do you have any other methods now? Thea did not comment on his words. Luther probably did not know that Doomsday would be a handicapped person from now on. The Sword of Victory and Oath had broken its hand from the principal level. Without the participation of the main gods who could not be mentioned by name or at the level of Zeus, its hand would never grow back. We have a way to completely destroy it, but it will take some time. Sigh, I'm coming. Thea hung up the phone. Batman had returned with a spear made of kryptonite. Superman, who was recuperating on the star, also landed majestically. Unfortunately, there was nothing for him to do here. Under Diana's wild attacks, the speed of Doomsday's cell repair was far slower than the speed of damage. Doomsday's body was riddled with holes, and it was rubbed against the ground like a rag. They looked at the green kryptonite spear in Batman's hand. Who would deal the final blow? Superman and Supergirl's faces turned green. It wasn't an adjective green, but a real green. Even if they didn't touch such a large piece of kryptonite with their skin, the 2 of them would still feel dizzy and their legs would cramp. The 2 of them could only reject this noble mission. Batman, it's better if you do it. This is a matter for humans. Thea pulled Diana, who had just finished her energy outburst. The Valkyrie's outburst had also put a heavy burden on her body. Only her body could withstand such extraordinary power. An ordinary person would only end up exploding and dying. Master Bat didn't refuse. Relying on his unparalleled dodging skills, he walked closer to Doomsday with the spear in his hand. Doomsday, who had been ravaged, almost didn't look like a human anymore. His whole body was covered in wounds, his eyes were blinded, and his lower body was twisted at a very strange angle. The only arm he had left seemed to want to grab Batman. His cells were still trying to evolve, but after being beaten up by Diana, his body became more and more deformed. Master Bat nimbly dodged the claw and stepped on Doomsday's neck. He held the spear tightly with both hands and stabbed it into Doomsday's head. Even if Doomsday was reduced to such a miserable state, Batman shouldn't have been able to kill him. However, the power of kryptonite offset Doomsday's strong skin. This biochemical weapon made from kryptonians wasn't perfect after all. Under Batman's powerful strength, the kryptonite spear penetrated Doomsday's brain inch by inch and finally pierced through. Doomsday, who had a strong vitality, was still struggling as if he didn't want to accept the fact that he had failed. Unfortunately, his efforts were all in vain in the face of the kryptonite. His cells were degraded by the kryptonite, and this speed became faster and faster as his resistance weakened. In the end, this monster, which symbolized the end of all races, reached the end of its life. Countless chaotic consciousnesses began to disappear, and the deformed head gradually lost its vitality under the influence of the kryptonite spear. Then, it was the body and limbs. Doomsday ushered in his own destruction. His twisted left arm shook wildly as if he was trying to grab something. The heavy arm finally welcomed death. It hit the ground heavily, creating a cloud of smoke. He was dead. Ouch. The girls were exhausted. Even Supergirl, who was in a good state, sat on the ground. If Superman's resistance to kryptonite was -99, then Supergirl's resistance was -100. Before today, she didn't know about the existence of kryptonite. Just being affected by the spectrum of kryptonite made her feel weak. Diana was also exhausted. The energy that far exceeded the capacity of her body made her sit on the ground weakly. Thea wasn't in a good state either, but she was more or less pretending. She wasn't as weak as she looked. Now that Doomsday was killed, it was a good thing. She didn't need to take out the kryptonite weapon and sealing device that she had prepared. Otherwise, it would be hard to explain why she had prepared these things. She secretly checked the spiritual space. The order scale was very satisfied with her behavior and gave her a large amount of willpower. It could be said that she was one step closer to the wall of origin to hook up with the source. The so-called big shot finally arrived at the end of the battle, just like in the movies. The person who came was the vice president, whom Thea had met a few times. Compared to the official business with the president, the vice president and Moira could still form a little friendship. The two of them were alumni who graduated from the same school. Accompanying him was naturally Amanda, who had a big heart and wasn't afraid of death. Is this thing really dead? The vice president was most concerned about this question. He didn't feel it when he was far away. Now that he was so close, looking at this 10-meter-tall deformed monster, he felt a chill run down his spine. Thea went up and kicked it twice, indicating that this thing was indeed dead. The vice president secretly wiped his sweat. Thinking of the mission, he asked in a somewhat tentative tone, "This corpse?" Thea spread her hands to show that she didn't care. Superman and Batman on the side objected in unison. In the original timeline, Doomsday and Doomsday died together. However, at this time when Thea was messing around, the young lady felt that Doomsday died before he could even see Superman. Superman shut himself in the sun for half an hour. When he came out, he found that the enemy was on his last breath. He only knew that the enemy was dead after he achieved great success. In fact, he was quite depressed. Chapter 514. It was only after he mastered the divine skill that he realized that the enemy was already dead. It was similar to the situation of Huang, who wrote the Nine Yin Sutra. The only difference was that Superman could still live for a long time. Although he did not fight doomsday, he still recognized this thing. Now that he was facing the American government who wanted Doomsday's corpse, he rejected it without thinking. This thing came from my home. It shouldn't exist on Earth. Batman, who had taken the last hit and got an honorable kill, also objected to the government taking Doomsday's corpse. Such a dangerous thing should be thrown into outer space. Among the four of them, Amanda was the main one. She did not give in to Batman at all. Seeing that their hatred was almost done, Thea made the final decision. Mr. Vice President, this creature is too dangerous. It should be put into the depths of space and never be allowed to appear on Earth. To be honest, as a politician, the Vice President did not like these things that he did not understand and could not control. He pretended to fight for it and explained to the other parties. In the end, he just let it go. The three women were all exhausted. The difficult task of throwing Doomsday's corpse into the depths of the universe was handed over to Superman. Seeing that Superman packed up Doomsday's corpse and took it away, the rest of the people dispersed. A battle that might have far-reaching effects finally came to an end. After Superman, several superheroes represented by Thea finally walked to the front of the stage. A new era was slowly but powerfully approaching everyone. In a secret underground base, Amanda, who was determined to be loyal to the country, was blindfolded and secretly brought here. Commander Amanda, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to accept our inquiry. There were several people in the venue that Amanda had never seen before. They were all people in power who secretly controlled the lifeblood of the country and the world. The President of the United States was a joke here. They only retreated behind the scenes to maintain the so-called democracy system. Now that the situation was serious, they had to make a new assessment to ensure the continuation and wealth of their respective families. We don't trust the Heaven's Eye Society. This organization has been established for too long and has infiltrated too many parties. However, we trust you, Commander Amanda. First, we want to know who this woman is. The old man in the lead looked to be in his 80s, but he was in good spirits. He had a dignified air about him, and he was dressed meticulously. After he finished speaking, he tapped on the screen, and Diana, who was surrounded by golden energy, appeared on the screen. Amanda scoffed at their so-called trust. None of them were 3 or 4 years old. That was a lie. Whoever believed it would be a fool. Sending an unknown agent to investigate him and entering the secret room blindfolded, was this trust? However, Amanda's moral integrity was quite high. She wouldn't spit on the old man's face. Diana Prince. We know very little about this woman. On the surface, she's the person in charge of the Hepburn Foundation. Based on the analysis of her armor and shield, the Heavenly Eye Society has a deep connection with ancient Greece. Does she have any weaknesses? The old man asked. Amanda gave a faint smile. She's Dr. Thea Quinn's lover. If there's a weakness, that's her weakness. Thea's image appeared on the screen. She was wearing a silver-white battle armor and holding a long sword. The old man took a look. Does this billionaire have a weakness? Amanda held back her laughter. Her weakness is naturally Diana Prince. The old man was almost angered to death. What the hell was this? You might as well not have said anything. Amanda, you must be unhappy that I'm investigating you, right? Another old woman in the room glanced at the old man with contempt. It was obvious that they weren't on good terms. The conflict between them could be traced back to 100 years. The old woman thought for a moment. We want to know their position. Commander Amanda, do you have any latest news? Diana has been working hard to eliminate discrimination and achieve equality between men and women. I'm sure no one has any objections to this policy. The few people in the room nodded. This wasn't a big deal. Countless politicians used this as a slogan and shouted it loudly. There were also countless ambitious people who devoted themselves wholeheartedly to it. In their eyes, this matter didn't conflict with their interests. Amanda pondered for a few seconds. As for Dr. Thea, the think tank of the Heaven's Eye Society has analyzed that she has mastered a lot of alien technology. She's consciously leading all of humanity into the interstellar era. She didn't mention that the Heaven's Eye Society was also debating about this issue. Thea's actions were almost undisguised. Anyone with half a brain could analyze it. There were those who supported it and those who disagreed. Relatively speaking, the younger agents were more supportive, while the older ones were more conservative. Amanda didn't reveal her position. Instead, she stood from a fair point of view and described the entire matter. In fact, the few old men in the room were the ones who didn't want to see the world change the most. However, the situation forced them to make a choice. They controlled the lifeline of the country and naturally didn't do it alone. Each of them had a huge family and network of connections. The actions of Miss Thea had actually shattered their inherent world. Their 10 fingers were not even on one side. Naturally, there were different opinions within the family. The older ones needed to be protected, and the younger ones' opinions couldn't be ignored. They were actually quite tired during this period. The leader of the old men saw that the topic had been diverted and tried to regain the initiative. Commander Amanda, what do you personally think about entering the interstellar era? Amanda was also the type of person who liked to court death. With her position, she didn't need to worry about these old men. Since you asked so sincerely, I'll be merciful and tell you. I personally support it. The danger of Earth is gradually increasing. I don't know what's causing it, but the trend of superpower criminals everywhere is very obvious. If we don't respond in time, the next step will be difficult to predict. The few old men didn't say anything. Other than playing tricks, they were a group of ordinary people. In the face of superpower criminals, they didn't have the ability to fight back. The few of them understood Amanda's subtext. Maintaining the current order into the interstellar era and absorbing the essence of extraterrestrial life might rely on various high-tech weapons, but they would still be at the top of the world. However, if they didn't move forward and didn't have the support of a huge amount of manpower and financial resources, they wouldn't be much stronger than ordinary people. It could be said that there weren't many choices left for them, and they didn't have much time. The monster that was destroyed in the metropolis, is it really impossible to destroy it with our current methods? Oh, I specifically asked Dr. Thea this question. Amanda paused for a moment. Dr. Thea told me a lot of things. This monster isn't from Earth, but from Superman's hometown. They named it Doomsday. This is a top biological weapon that has destroyed many planets. Chapter 5:15. After that, Amanda went on a rampage, saying that Earth was a level 3 civilization and Krypton was a level 8 civilization. She left a lot of space for these people to fill in the blanks. The old guys' hearts turned cold. They repeatedly asked questions, not only about Thea and Diana, but also about Superman and Batman. Compared to their usual disguises, these superheroes were also maintaining their power to a certain extent, so they were somewhat relieved. However, the evil scientist on Earth made them worried. The one who attracted the most attention was naturally Luthor in this incident. With his huge financial resources and smart mind, he almost poked a hole in Earth. However, in order to balance the power of the superheroes, they had a tacit understanding. No one said anything about shooting Luthor. Even if they had uncontrollable intelligence, they still wanted to have more trump cards in their hands. Amanda quickly left the room and entered a few more people to be questioned, including the current president. Unlike a video call, a lot of things could be learned from face-to-face communication. What should we do next? After the questioning, the old man turned to look at the others. Let's absorb the Quinn family into our circle. Isn't Moira going to be the president? Let her be. As long as she joins us, her daughter and her daughter's close friends can also be used by us. The old woman threw out an idea that she had been thinking about for a long time. The few of them were a little silent. The president was not attractive to them, but accepting a new family was equivalent to dividing a large amount of benefits from their respective areas, which made them a little reluctant. Of course, they had another option, which was to absorb Bruce Wayne into their circle. Batman's true identity was not difficult to find out, but they had more concerns. Moira was a politician, so she could talk to them, communicate, and exchange benefits with them. Batman was purely a superhero. If he was dissatisfied with something and flipped the table, the consequences would be very serious. It was not difficult to choose between dealing with a superhero or dealing with a superhero's mother. Discrimination between men and women also played a role. They did not know that the young lady had strengthened her mother. They generally thought that the middle-aged woman, Moira, was easier to deal with than Batman, who could use 127 types of fighting techniques. After they reached a preliminary agreement, they left. Thea, who watched the live video through the military network, was secretly pleased. As she once told Sebastian, the non-existent, it was too easy for her to do bad things without the constraints of family and friends. Due to the difference in technology, Gideon had long gained access to the military network. During the Doomsday War, Gideon had rewritten some of Red Whirlwind's code. Judging from its ownership, this black technology product of the military was already under her control. These people in power thought that their actions were covert, but in fact, Thea had been watching them from the beginning of the meeting. The result was similar to what she had expected. With her and Diana or Green Arrow, there was no obstacle to Moira's advancement. As long as there was no big news, the White House would definitely prepare a bedroom for her 2 years later. For the next few days, Thea was surrounded by a pile of chores. The metropolis was hit hard again. In the past, there was the Luther group, but now she was the only large group left. Money had long lost its meaning to her. Although the young lady did not need to stand on the top of the mountain and shout for everyone's approval to become the Hokage, she urgently needed the wish power generated by the gratitude of ordinary citizens. It was the same as in the previous years. Those who did not have a house would build a house, those who did not have food would be given free food, and those who were injured would get the best treatment. Oliver basically let the construction group in his hands grow freely. Thea was not polite to him and directly pulled the construction team to build a simple house. The citizens of the metropolis were very experienced. Whether it was the battle between Superman and Zod 18 months ago, or the several small-scale battles against Superman, including the battle between the 3 women and Doomsday, many people hid in the basement at first and came out after dawn. So basically, it was a loss of property. Some of the sharp-eyed people in the crowd felt that Thea was very similar to the figure of the woman holding the sword, but the young lady neither admitted nor denied it. She stood at the front of the stage and accepted everyone's worship. She was not thick-skinned enough, and Diana did not like to be disturbed in her daily life. Both of them chose to keep a low profile. Supergirl wanted to show off, but unfortunately, Superman blabbered on and on about hiding her identity and living a normal life. The little girl pitifully continued to wear her old-fashioned glasses to school. Before knowing that Luther was going to be transferred to a secret place, Thea decided to meet him. Luther, who was wearing a prison uniform and had shaved his head bald, looked much more energetic than before. At this time, he was sitting in the prison, full of energy, waiting for something. "Looks like you're looking good." The invisible Thea walked out directly. Luther was not surprised by her sudden appearance. He looked behind her and pursed his lips. Superman does not have this ability. Is this the ability of the Protoss? Originally, she just wanted to see him. She did not expect to receive new information. Thea's tone became more serious. Protoss. Why did you specifically use this word? The two of them looked at each other. Luther pondered for a long time before speaking. I'm not you. I don't have so many alien friends. I only infer based on the clues I know. Thea nodded and motioned for him to continue. There is one Protoss in the universe, or two. Luther looked carefully at Thea's eyes, but he could not find anything. One of them provided me with a lot of key technology for Doomsday. If I'm not wrong, you are from the other side. I just don't understand. Why do you pay attention to Earth? What do you need here? Thea fell into silence. Luther said a lot of things without guessing. He could rely on words that could not even be considered clues to make up something that was similar to the truth. This person's intelligence could be said to be heaven-defying. As for Thea, Luther said that she was also a Protoss. He knew her well. The young lady was quite beautiful. After thinking about it, it was not something that could not be mentioned. He immediately said, Earth is very important. Its importance is far beyond imagination. As for the Protoss, I can only say that your guess is right. There are indeed two Protoss. We call them the new Protoss. One of them is righteous and the other is evil. The one who taught you knowledge should be the evil new god. You really know a lot of things. Why did they teach me to create Doomsday? Luther thought about this question for a long time but could not figure it out. At first, he thought that the other party had bad intentions, but no matter how he verified, the knowledge was not fake. Doomsday was created as expected. Other than putting himself in prison, Luther could not figure out what the other party was plotting against him. There were no clues at all. No matter how high his intelligence was, it was useless. Now that he had caught Thea, this wise person, he had to ask. Chapter 5:16. Thea didn't know what the wasteland wolf was up to. There was no need for her to brag, so she shook her head. My sister is still young, you. Luther wanted to say something, but Thea had already left. Seeing that Luther wasn't too annoying, Thea gave up on her plan to buy out the entire Luther group after leaving the secret prison. Instead, she decided to buy out the key departments separately. The Luther group was in a very bad situation. Their liquid funds had already been used up, and the chairman had committed an unforgivable crime. The Cadmus project, which Luther had spent a lot of money on, had been seized by the government for treason, crimes against humanity, and 26 other crimes. It sounded nice, saying that after the truth was found out, a portion of the money would be returned to the Luther family according to the relevant laws. However, anyone with a discerning eye knew that it was a lie. Thea brought up her plan to buy out the Luther group, and Luther's mother very frankly admitted defeat. The two quickly finalized the agreement. Several high-tech and new energy-related departments were all bought out by Thea, and Luther's remaining widows and orphans also received the funds they desperately needed. They were no longer in the miserable situation of selling their house and sleeping in a hotel. Both sides were very eager to complete the deal before the government and other business competitors reacted. In just 3 days, the two sides completed the deal. Thea bought out half of the Luther Group's assets at a slightly higher price, and all of them were the most technologically advanced parts. As for how the widows and orphans would deal with the blood-sucking elites from all walks of life, Thea didn't have to worry about that. She quickly integrated all kinds of resources, and the people in the group were ordered around by her. She quickly completed the separation and integration of the various departments and the placement of new employees. As the world's #1 high-tech group, Thea finally launched the new plan that she had been planning for a long time. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the plan I specially made for the future of the group. In order to cope with the increasing number of global crises, the Quinn Group will integrate the essence of the world's technology, take advantage of the Earth's human population, and create the ultimate human weapon for the new era. Thea gestured for the secretary to pass the proposal to the heads of the relevant departments, including her #1 henchman, Felicity. After the secretary was cured by her, she had nowhere to go for a while. Only then did Thea know that the secretary was loyal to Luther, not his family. Luther couldn't come out for 2 or 3 years, so it was impossible for her to spy on his secrets. 2 years later, Thea would be in a higher position, so she didn't have to worry about the secretary's betrayal. She calmly hired Miss Maisie, and the secretary was also familiar with the job. In just 2 days, she pushed Thea's original secretary aside. Miss Maisie didn't disappoint her old subordinate who had been with her for several years. She found a department with real power and put her in charge. Now, the secretary handed the documents to everyone in the meeting room skillfully. Pacific Rim Plan? The few supervisors were a little stunned. This title was a little big. Thea explained as she showed them. Gather the existing forces to build a giant mecha that is 100 meters tall and weighs 1,000 tons. It will be driven by nuclear power and equipped with electromagnetic weapons, missiles, powerful physical weapons, and even nuclear weapons when necessary. As for the mecha pilot, we will take advantage of the large number of humans. 2 or 3 pilots with similar brainwaves will be assigned to connect their floating neurons to control these giants. Select pilots from all over the world and carry out data matching and screening. Our company will develop the first generation of trial mecha. I expect to do the preliminary test in a month. Do you have any other questions? Thea gave them a brief rundown of what had happened. The people in the meeting room were the technical backbone of the company. To some extent, they represented the highest level of research and development on Earth today. Thea's giant mecha didn't exceed the current technology by much, but once it was put into operation, it would cause a huge sensation. Thea's superhero identity was a little vague. Those who knew about it knew, but those who didn't were skeptical. The plan in front of them was from the perspective of ordinary people. Once a few technical difficulties were solved, the huge number of people on Earth might really give humans a powerful weapon. Ordinary people can control such a huge robot? Felicity asked after the meeting. The former hacker had no resistance to these technological products. Now, her eyes were shining. Of course, this is the best weapon I've thought of. A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. 2 hours after her plan was announced, a few observant people saw the full text of the plan. In an old house full of vicissitudes of history, a few elders had a meeting again. That professor is starting to speed up. This wasn't hard to see. Thea's steps were very obvious. She was starting to speed up the entire human civilization, regardless of whether the other party was willing or not. The few old men were a little grinning. It's a good thing just looking at the plan. If it succeeds, we can also get rid of the predicament of being controlled by superheroes. I think we should support it. A rather dignified middle-aged man said. Such a huge steel beast can only be created by super large corporations or a few strong countries. It's impossible to hide such a huge thing. It's impossible to eliminate the possibility of private and illegal corporations creating it. The few of them analyzed from their own perspectives. In the end, they miraculously found that this Pacific Rim plan didn't harm them and even had many benefits. The faces of the politicians who were beneficial to them were exposed. Support her. In the next month, Thea and the entire corporation were very busy. At first, a few corporations with ulterior motives sent commercial spies to investigate carefully, but soon found that Thea didn't hide it at all. They couldn't be bothered to be petty and sent representatives to observe the scene. Quinn Corporation was very generous this time. They directly built a manufacturing factory on the outskirts of the metropolis. A huge amount of money was invested, and thousands of tons of steel was used as the main material. A huge steel monster was gradually showing its magnificence. With Thea's own ability to create armor, coupled with the corporation's and Luther's technological reserves, the construction of the giant mech wasn't afraid of outsiders. The core technology was in her hands. From the outside, it looked like a huge toy that had been magnified countless times. Thea was using her power to suppress others. Other than a limited number of countries, no one or organization could compete with her in this field. Her plan was simple. She would integrate the world's resources and create 50 of these giant mechs. Then, humans would have the basic capital to communicate with the galaxy. Otherwise, it would be inappropriate to talk to aliens with F-22s. In the future, whether it was the interstellar era or the war against Darkseid, humans shouldn't be spectators. They should watch superheroes fight to the death while they hid in a corner, trembling and praying to unknown gods. Instead, they should do their part. Chapter 517. A month later, in a valley on the outskirts of the metropolis. The trial run of the ultimate weapon of mankind in the new era by the Quinn Group had finally begun. After several rounds of selection, the final candidates turned out to be the sisters, Laurel Lance and Sarah Rice. Thea was not too surprised by this result. After all, compared to ordinary people, superheroes who had undergone rigorous training, even if they were ordinary superheroes, had far more willpower and reaction speed than ordinary people. Now, Laurel, who had started training several years in advance, and Sarah, who had trained hard in the Assassin League for several years, were about to blossom into their own glory. The 80-meter-tall, 1,500-ton supergiant mech began its high-profile trial run under the control of the sisters. The mech slowly stood up with its arms on the ground, and its huge weight caused the airflow to change. A violent wind blew through the entire valley, and many nearby trees were blown down. The political leaders who were watching this scene remotely in the metropolis began to whisper to each other. A minute passed. After some ground simulation training in advance, the coordination and synchronization of the sisters, who were skilled in martial arts, began to improve. As they gradually familiarized themselves with the control of the mech, today's other guest, Superman, appeared on time. The superheroes were generally supportive of humans having a greater ability to protect themselves. Except for Batman, who was worried that this would deepen the bullying of small countries by powerful countries, everyone else's opinion was basically positive. Enemies like Zod and Doomsday appeared one after another. If the enemies they faced in the future were to become stronger and stronger, it would not be a bad thing for humans to have some resistance. Superman's task today was very simple. It was to test the attack and defense of the robot. In order to prevent the politicians from thinking too much, and not to belittle the results of her work, Thea calculated the maximum strength of a robot for 2 days. This value was equivalent to 20 to 30% of Superman's strength. Superman looked like a burly man, but in fact, his acting skills were not bad. After all, he switched back and forth between the two identities of Superman every day. His acting skills were not bad. The mech stretched out its arms and bent its legs in place. The sisters quickly familiarized themselves with the operation. After receiving the command from Thea at the console, they threw a punch at Superman with a huge amount of kinetic energy. In the face of the huge steel mech that was powered by nuclear power and composed of 50 power engines per muscle, Superman carefully suppressed his strength and also threw a punch. The disproportionate fists of the two sides collided, and the huge roar could be heard throughout the metropolis. Many people saw the live broadcast. The various values from the Quinn group quickly began to feed back. The theoretical value of the impact has reached 30,000 tons. The mecha's power system has been affected by the impact. 9 engines have malfunctioned. The lower half of the mecha is stable. It can continue to fight. The shock absorption effect of the armor coating is only 90% of the expected. The heads of the various departments began to report their observation data separately. Thea nodded. The data did not exceed her expectations by too much. Overall, she was quite satisfied. She connected to the cockpit and asked, "Lance sisters, do you feel any discomfort?" The Lance sisters were driving as ordinary people, so she definitely couldn't call them Black Canary or White Canary. "We just started warming up." Unlike the hysterical and delicate girl on Purgatory Island, Sarah Lance now had the demeanor of the captain of tomorrow's legendary team after years of training. She was the one who took the initiative between the two sisters. The giant mech pulled out 2 short sticks from its arms. These 2 sticks were specially built according to the Lance sisters' habits. Each stick was 50 meters long and weighed 600 tons. The whole body was made of titanium alloy. The materials for these 2 sticks alone cost Thea $350 million. The giant mech skillfully waved the sticks, caught a floor, and sent Superman flying like a fly. There was a burst of cheers at the scene, which made Louise Lane, who saw the scene, not know whether to laugh or cry. "My Superman didn't even use his full strength. Can't you see?" The dignitaries all stared at the screen. As laymen, they were secretly happy that Superman was killed, and worried that the cost of this weapon was too high. Unfortunately, their thoughts were all in vain. Although Superman was hit into the mountain, he was not hurt at all. He had never dealt with the Lance sisters, but he knew that they were not ordinary citizens. The battle intent in his heart was slightly released, and the two sides fought back and forth. Is the situation really that bad? Everyone in the conference room was focused on the screen, and Bruce Wayne whispered to Thea. The young lady was now dragging the humans to climb the technology tree. With his IQ, it was not difficult to find the problem. "Remember the Omega symbol you mentioned to me last time? I went to see Luther a few days ago. From his analysis, we are being targeted by a terrifying race. Many of the key knowledge of Doomsday were taught to Luther by this race. Our world is very dangerous," Thea said in a low voice. There were many people at the scene, so the two just said a few words and went their separate ways. The battle in the valley was still going on as usual. The Lance sisters relied on their skillful martial arts to fully display the abilities of their mecha. This valley, which usually attracted many outdoor enthusiasts on weekends for rock climbing adventures, was completely destroyed by their battle. "Okay, Lance sisters, stop. Thea saw that the mecha's damage had exceeded 20% and hurriedly stopped them. This was a waste of money. The two sisters successfully stopped the mech. Superman did not continue to pester them. This was originally an experiment to boost the morale of the humans and reduce their hostility towards him. He destroyed the mech, which had no practical use other than to deepen the fear of ordinary people towards him. Superman flew away with a whoosh. In less than 2 minutes, Clark, with his old-fashioned eyes, returned to the scene as if nothing had happened. Thea glanced at Superman, who was intimate with Louise again, and did not say anything. This guy's destructive power was too great. The mecha's energy consumption and various parts of the mech would require at least 7 to 800 million USD to repair. Although she had acquired half of Luther Group's quality department, and the group's share price had risen greatly, Thea still felt a little distressed about this unplanned expense. Wool comes from sheep, so she immediately began to transfer the financial pressure to them. Countries like the United States cried every day that they had no money, but in fact, it was all an act. Thea's goal was to sell it to them. Generals, what do you think? Thea asked a few old men in military uniforms with a faint smile. She didn't need to use a heavy hammer. Her intention was clear. If the United States did not buy it, other countries would buy it. At least on the surface, this was a weapon that could compete with Superman. The advantages of the giant mech were undeniable. Ordinary people could operate it, and the weapon system was within the scope of understanding. Although the cost of production was high enough to give people a heart attack, a problem that could be solved with money was not a big problem for them. Chapter 518. This kind of mech was expensive to manufacture, but it had many advantages. The only disadvantage was that small countries did not have the ability to manufacture it on their own. However, this was an advantage for the military and the government. The few of them exchanged glances and quickly reached a consensus. We want 3 of the same model. Both parties did not talk about the pilots. The military had taken away her brainwave simulator long ago and selected excellent pilots from the lower-level troops. Thea did not have to worry about this. The demonstration was very successful. The other 4 countries also ordered one each. Their thoughts were not hard to guess. They wanted to buy one and reverse engineer it to reverse engineer the technology used by Thea. Their plan was good, but there was a key problem. Earth was too small and resources were limited. Gideon had calculated that if all the resources in the world were integrated, they could manufacture about 80 of this kind of giant mech. However, the whole world working together, that was simply a dream. Optimistically, if the industrial capacity of each country was fully developed, 50 would be the limit. No country could tolerate others having it and not having it. Even if it was purely for the sake of an arms race, they would have to grit their teeth and follow suit. When that time came, the lack of resources would force them to step into the interstellar era. After a period of dormancy, Thea's subordinates and the Yellow Lantern Corps did not disappoint. They secretly took over the Ibn Trade Alliance and completely controlled 6 of the 15 planets of this neutral trade alliance. They could also exert influence on the remaining planets. The rebellion of the mechanical soldiers caused this neutral interstellar alliance to suffer heavy losses. At the critical moment, the Yellow Lantern Corps came out like a savior and saved the Ibn Trade Alliance. This group of businessmen who wandered between the various forces were not fools. In order to balance out the power of the Yellow Lantern Corps, they supported another force to fight against it. That was the mercenary group led by Death Knell. They did not know that these 2 groups of people had a common leader. They thought that they had succeeded in balancing the left and the right. Controlling this interstellar trade alliance meant that Thea had the resources of dozens of planets for her to squander. The politicians of Earth could only dream of getting rid of her. Time passed slowly. Thea's life gradually settled down. The strong, or rather, resilient people of the metropolis cleared the rubble in their homes and resumed their normal work and life. Thea was also summarizing her gains and losses in the battle with Doomsday. Many of the backup plans that she had prepared were not used. This meant that she had underestimated her own strength. However, there were still many problems exposed in this battle. She used fear to control the sacred sword, which was very uncoordinated. The sacred sword could contain the emotion of fear, but this kind of negative emotion would still cancel out a lot of the sacred sword's power, which made Thea very unhappy. Finding a type of positive energy became the top priority. Normally, green light's courage was very suitable to provide energy to the holy sword. However, Thea's current identity as a yellow light was a little awkward. On the other hand, she did not want to be controlled by the guardian of the blue men. Anger, greed, fear, courage, hope, compassion, love. Among the 7 emotions, the first 3 were all negative emotions. Putting the courage in the middle aside for the time being, Sia focused on the last 3. Love was supposed to be a beautiful thing, but love on the emotional spectrum was too grand. Regardless of whether it was good or bad, it could be described as love. This made Thea, who loved rationally, unable to accept it. The only emotions left were the blue light of hope and the blue light of compassion. Considering that Ganther had left the main planet of Aura and was establishing the blue light core, the young mistress rushed over to be the boss. This kind of behavior was generally known as courting death. Ganther could not defeat the ghost, but it should not be too difficult to defeat Thea. The blue light of hope option could only be removed. The only option left was the blue light of compassion. Initially, she was going to let her secretary, Miss Maisie, try it, but the holy sword made her determined. Originally, she only wanted to take the blue light ring, but now she wanted to swallow the entire blue light tribe. They did not have strong blue men as guardians, and their combat strength was not high either. They were able to survive more by relying on secrecy. The Blue Light Tribe was a secret force established by Abin Su to prevent the ancient prophecy of the Dark Knight. Their planet had always been unknown to outsiders. Fortunately, Thea had worn Abin Su's ring and knew the coordinates of this planet. After settling the affairs of Earth, Thea did not bring anyone with her. She flew to the target coordinates. What a godforsaken place. After a few consecutive wormholes, she finally arrived at the planet that Abin Su called Nock. This planet was not big, and the climate was not comfortable at all. The planet relied on a kind of weak light emitted by a kind of plant to provide illumination. There were so many impurities in the air that ordinary people on Earth could not live here without an oxygen mask. The humid climate made a layer of fine water droplets hang on her long windbreaker. The ground was muddy. Thea, who originally wanted to secretly investigate, could only fly into the air and look around. Traces of a prosperous civilization could be seen on this planet. 100 million square miles of buildings were connected into a whole, and the huge man-made buildings occupied almost half of the planet's space. But now, this place was completely abandoned, and the broken walls and ruins still showed visitors the glory that this place once had. Thea took a few glances. She was not here for archaeology. She was thinking about a more realistic problem. There were very few clues about the Blue Light Tribe in her memory. She only knew that it was very mysterious and was a friend of justice, but she did not know what exactly was mysterious and where was justice. Just as she was thinking to herself, a green light flashed and 3 people blocked her way. Their leader was a woman. Her complexion was like a violet, and her aura was vague. The most eye-catching thing about her was her forehead, which was the symbol of the Green Lamp Tribe. Yes, they called themselves a tribe, not an army. A circle in the middle and 2 lines pointing outward formed 2 arrowheads. Thea did not have a deep understanding of symbology, but she vaguely felt that it represented care and giving. Unlike the symbols of the Yellow Light Tribe, the symbols of the Blue Light Tribe were very simple and modest. From it, one could feel compassion, charity, and care for others with their own value. The woman appeared silently, and behind her stood 2 burly men. Of course, if you ignored the fact that one of them had 4 arms and the other had the head of an eagle, they could be called men. The 3 of them were holding long staffs in the shape of pipes, which could be used as weapons and could also be used to recharge the rings. In his memory, they were extremely good at teleportation. Now that he saw it, Sia, who had a little knowledge of teleportation, did not find any traces of teleportation at first. Although the other party had borrowed the power of the light ring, this kind of teleportation that did not have the slightest trace of smoke made Sia look askance. The 2 sides were looking at each other, and Thea was a little hesitant to speak. What language did they speak? She did not know. It was impossible to speak English, and it was not appropriate to take out the yellow light ring to translate. After all, she was not here to make trouble. After thinking about it, she decided to start with the universal language. Chapter 519. Are you a member of Blue Lamp? Thea pretended to be casual and asked. Tigro Wasenbor, NU. The woman in the lead spoke a language that Thea didn't understand. Ah. I'm Abin Su's friend. He mentioned you to me. The young lady continued to use the dead person as a cover. When the woman opposite her heard Abin Su's name, her pupils shrank a little. Lekla Cabinfoam, NU. Thea's eyelids twitched a little. Then, the two of them talked for a long time. The woman opposite her looked stupefied as she talked nonsense with her. Thea didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Judging from their subtle expressions, the other party could definitely understand her words, but they deliberately pretended not to know. Moreover, their language was similar to a certain Simida country on Earth. Every time they finished a sentence, they would end the sentence with a NU. As the two of them talked, more and more people gathered around them. Of course, they were the other party's people. Thea calmly glanced around and secretly laughed in her heart. So mediocre. There were more than 30 people on the other side. It seemed that she was surrounded by them alone. In fact, these were just ordinary aliens. Blue Lamp was not famous for being good at fighting, so she wasn't afraid at all. Okay, your people are almost here. I know you can understand my words. You are Ching Nu, right? I have heard of your name. You killed Abin Su's daughter. What's your original name? Thea felt that it was enough. There were only about 100 people on this planet. If more than 100 people attacked her, it would be very troublesome. She wanted to cut the Gordian knot. Ching Nu, who was exposed, didn't pretend anymore. Her expression was a little indifferent. I killed Abin Su's daughter, but he took pity on me and let me continue to live in this world to atone for my sins. My original name is not important. I am now Ching Nu, and only Ching Nu, a noble sentiment worthy of praise. Thea pretended to praise her. I have always admired the brilliance of Blue Lamp. I wonder if I will be lucky enough to get a Blue Lamp ring. Ching Nu's expression was as indifferent as ever. Of course. Then, under Thea's secretly delighted gaze, she raised her long cane. The premise is that you must first purify the evil in your heart. Nu. After saying that, a blue light shot towards Thea. The bold and skilled Thea naturally wouldn't be hit by such a crude attack. She sent the energy beam flying with a mana hand. Are you crazy? Thea was a little annoyed. Why did he suddenly start fighting? You change your attitude faster than flipping a book. It must be purified, Nu. It must be purified, Nu. The remaining 30 or so people seemed to have been blessed by something. Each of them held a long staff in their hands, which emitted a green light towards Thea. These people didn't take their medicine today. What did I say? Why are you attacking me? Thea was a little depressed. It was impossible for her to not fight back when she was hit or scolded. Since the other party had already made a move, Thea didn't hold back and directly counterattacked with lightning magic. Chain lightning, lightning ball, and lightning beam. The water element on this planet was very rich. She also cast ice storm, which was a mixture of water and wind magic. Ching Nu on the opposite side was caught off guard by her sudden outburst. The group of people hurriedly activated their emotional conjuration to resist the magic power of the storm. I thought you were strong. Why aren't you guys using your Nu? Thea directly struck the other party's conjuration with a lightning beam with a diameter of 2 meters. Even the conjuration of 30 people's emotions couldn't stop her vigorous magic power. On one hand, they didn't have much experience in conjuration. On the other hand, Thea was now using the divine armor, which allowed her magic power to be converted very quickly. At the same time, the magic power of the 6 elements in her body was endless. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 large-scale spells fell on the group of lunatics. Water tornadoes swept across the battlefield, and ice storm covered the sky within a radius of 10 miles. Thea herself controlled the lightning to continuously bombard their conjuration defenses. Nu. The woman in the lead waved her green dragon crescent blade a few times in the air with both hands. A dazzling green light flashed, and more than 30 people were directly teleported away by her. You ran fast. Yo! I'll retreat too. Thea was quite pleased with herself at first. However, she soon realized that the other party was not retreating. Instead, they were gathering more people to attack her. Thea was not afraid of a tribe of more than 100 people even if they were all wearing lantern rings. The adopted son of the original Spacetime father, Darkseid's second son, Olean of the New Gods, fought against dozens of Green Lanterns and beat up Hal Jordan. Similarly, Olean was much weaker when fighting against Diana's divine siblings. The New Gods' level of life had nothing to do with their specific combat power. Thea felt that her combat power was about the same as Olean's. Of course, she couldn't fight against thousands of experienced Green Lanterns at the same time, but it was not a problem for her to deal with 100 or so unskilled Green Lanterns. Just as she was about to attack head-on, she felt something strange. Thea felt that the planet was resisting her. After absorbing Gaia's divine power from Earth, she was very sensitive to the will of a planet. This planet was certainly not as strong as Earth, but the will of a planet was not to be trifled with. It was impossible to predict and reason with. After a moment of hesitation, Thea chose to avoid it. To be honest, this battle was inexplicable. These people started fighting without saying anything. If they couldn't win, they would team up. If they still couldn't win, they would probably communicate with the will of the planet and self-destruct. Their style of doing things really surprised her. She put on an invisibility spell and scanned her surroundings with her supervision. Being extremely sensitive to emotional energy, she soon found something strange. Before Ching Nu and the others surrounded her, she rushed into the dense forest in the distance. Thea walked through the dense vegetation, looking back from time to time. She didn't know if the Green Lanterns were wary of this forest or if they had not discovered her. In less than 3 minutes, the vague feeling of being chased completely disappeared. Following the subtle emotional energy detected by her mind power, Thea walked and stopped. Finally, she stopped in an open area. Aliens. An old man who was not as tall as Thea's waist walked out. According to Thea's aesthetics, this old man could basically be classified as ugly. His head was big, his body was small, and his limbs seemed to be malnourished. His exposed skin was covered with symbols of the Green Lanterns. He also held a long staff, but he didn't have a lantern ring. In countless interstellar journeys, Thea had been treated as an alien many times. Especially since this seemed to be the Green Lantern's planet, she accepted the title of alien calmly. As if seeing her doubts, the old man said, "Alien, you shouldn't have come to this planet. The Horde has long deviated from its original intention." "Maybe I have. Anyway, you shouldn't have come here." The old man's contradictory statement made Thea even more confused. Why are they attacking me? The emotion of pity is too rare. They believe that only pure people are worthy of this emotion. They will use the power of the emotion to purify everyone, making them reach the standard of wearing the lamp ring. "This is the biggest difference between me and them," the old man said unhurriedly as if he was leading the way. Chapter 520. The old guide's words made Thea couldn't help but yell, damn, she had always been the one to brainwash others. Now that she knew that she was about to be brainwashed, she was extremely upset. "You know so many things. You. Who are you to them?" The old man was silent for a long time. When Thea thought he had fallen asleep, he finally spoke. "The Green Lamp Tribe was created by me and another Green Lantern. I know this, Abin Su. I even got the coordinates of this planet from his ring. It seems that you know a lot of things. How is Abin Su?" The old man asked with a sense of camaraderie. "Pretty good." Thea replied with a smile. If you ignore the fact that he had a close contact with Earth in a spaceship and was dismembered into small pieces by Earth scientists, then Abin Su was indeed pretty good. Abin Su is a good man. A few centuries ago, a group of invaders destroyed our civilization. We call it Enu's world. The invaders turned Nu into a colony and a place to collect resources. Countless people were transported to unknown worlds through the universe. I am the last survivor of this planet. Abinsu saved me. The old man told Thea a story with a sad face. She didn't understand why he was telling this to her. She thought maliciously, could it be that he had something to say? I fought with Abinsu, the old man said. Thea couldn't help but look at him. He was less than a meter tall and weighed less than 30 pounds. You fought with Abinsu? You don't have to pay taxes for bragging. The old man didn't know what she was thinking and continued, we defeated the colonists, but our people had been wiped out. I had fulfilled my wish and was ready to enter the deepest part of Nu's world to enjoy my final peace. Speaking of this, the old man paused, as if some scenes had appeared in front of his eyes. I saw the real Nu in the deepest part of the world. It was an indescribable power. I told all this to my friend Abinsu. He used his special power to help me extract Nu and make a lamp ring. The will of the world. This word appeared in Thea's mind. When this planet saw its people being kidnapped and killed, it gave birth to compassion. This was really beyond Thea's understanding. If this happened to her, she would kill all her enemies. Compassion? You must be kidding me. However, it was precisely this kind of universal love that could serve as the main energy source for the green lamp. Not long after, Abinsu returned. He brought with him his old enemy, the murderer of his daughter, a ruthless woman named Elok. Elok put on the world's first azure ring. The ring changed her. She couldn't stop crying because of what she had done. From then on, she called herself Lady Ching. After that, Abinsu intermittently brought back many people. They are all criminals in the universe. The green lamp changed them one by one. Abinsu left with satisfaction. Alien, do you know where he went? He hasn't come back to see me for a long time. The old man looked at Thea expectantly. Thea didn't think it was appropriate to say that he had been dead for a few years. White lies were still acceptable. The old man's body was empty, and there was no energy reaction. If it weren't for the fact that his real strength was 17 or 18 levels higher than Thea's, he would be an ordinary person with less than 5 combat power. Ordinary lanterns would be dumbfounded when encountering this problem. The ability of the Azure Ring limited them from continuing to deceive. The Azure Ring could only record images and could not create a real scene out of thin air. Thea, who could be regarded as a great wizard in ancient times, had no problem with this. Making up lies was as natural as drinking water. She immediately cast a water mirror spell, and the image showed Abinsu when he was still alive. In Kaluga Sanisto's collection, there were many images of Abinsu. She casually recalled a few scenes, and in order to show her close relationship with Abinsu, she edited it on the spot, and even added herself into the scene to fool the old man. The old man, who was a little gay, was very happy to see his close friend. Thea timely proposed to observe the source of the compassion. The old man did not hesitate too much and frankly agreed. With a spell in hand, I have the world. This group of people is too easy to fool. Fortunately, I don't have much malice towards the Green Lantern, otherwise, these guys will die without knowing how. However, Thea's plan has to be changed again. Originally, she wanted to take down this organization. Later, she wanted to settle for a ring. Now, the brainwashing function of the ring is too powerful. It is a bit like the American version of Koto Amatsukami. For this kind of unreasonable forced conversion, she politely declined. She could not wear this thing easily before figuring out the principle. Fortunately, the old man took the initiative to give her a chance to experience the compassion at close range. It's not a problem to look at it without wearing the ring, right? She, who controlled the total energy of the yellow lantern, was still confident. If she could change her mind at a glance, she would be invincible. The whole universe should be envious. The old man led her slowly through the forest. As a good friend of Abinsu, she could not pull the old man's neck collar to make him walk faster. Thea could only follow him slowly. Yes, the old man was too short and walked slowly. One step of Thea, who was 1.8 meters tall, was equivalent to 3 steps of the old man. She could not use force, so she could only be patient and walk slowly. Maybe the old man triggered some talkative attribute. He was very interested in talking with this good friend of his. He pointed to the surrounding scenery and kept telling stories from a long time ago. Sia, who was experienced in dealing with old people, could only answer perfunctorily. They were surrounded by large trees and dense forests. She really could not see anything worth talking about. Accompanying the old man, Sia had an extraterrestrial version of the Zhong family's and Li family's stories. She felt that the natives of this planet must have a particularly strong saliva secretion. After chatting for a while, the old man did not feel thirsty at all. She had to admit that she was impressed. According to her calculation, they walked for at least 8 hours of the Earth's time. The old man finally led her to a mountain stream. "Go in, young man. This is the total energy of compassion you are looking for." The two chatted all the way. The old man had a good impression of Thea. It was evident that he changed the way he called her from an alien to a young man. "Thank you for leading the way. From the analysis of what you said before, you seem to be not satisfied with the current Green Lantern tribe." Having sensed the emotional energy, Thea was not in a hurry to go in. She saw that the old man had the intention to leave and wanted to ask more inside stories. "Do you know about the Dark Knight?" The old man asked a new question. Thea naturally knew about such a famous event, but she pretended to be confused and shook her head gently. Abin Su once saw the future. On the Dark Knight, the dead would be reborn and destroy all life. He prepared an army in advance for the arrival of that day, which was the Green Lantern tribe. The old man was very proud of his friend and narrated with a sense of accomplishment. Chapter 521. In the darkest night, the green lamp will play a pivotal role. This is just the beginning. Do you know, Abin Su's friend? There is a group of people in the universe who are secretly manipulating the changes in the world. In the vision Abin Su saw in the future, they were trying to destroy the world, and the green lamp was the key to stopping them. The old man's voice grew louder as he spoke. Thea was a little confused. Who was he talking about? It sounded like Darkseid of the new Protoss. She did not understand, so she decided to ask directly. "What is the name of this group of people?" The old man said very seriously. Abin Su called them the Guardians of the Universe. Thea almost vomited blood. Her imaginary enemy had changed from the fat Darkseid, who was 3 meters tall and weighed thousands of pounds, to the Guardian of the Blue Men, who was less than 3 meters tall and weighed 10 pounds. This was a big change. The old man was still talking. The green lamp is an experiment to stop the madness of the Guardians. Abin Su planned to bring like-minded people to break through the Guardians' defense from the inside, and the green lamp would convert their extreme thoughts from the outside. The old man gestured with his long cane as he spoke, dancing with excitement. Thea wanted to laugh. The old man probably did not know that the Guardians were the leaders of the Green Lanterns. If Abin Su, the hero in his heart, really did do this, he would be a rebel. Judging by his words and actions, Abin Su, who had died young, did not seem to be an honest person. The Guardians had a big problem with their judgment. The so-called greatest Green Lanterns, Abin Su, Sinisto, and Hal Jordan, had either rebelled or were on the way to rebelling. How unpopular were the Guardians to be betrayed by everyone? Sinisto was only at odds with them, but Abin Su actually wanted to brainwash the Guardians. Fortunately, he had died early. Otherwise, Sinisto wouldn't have had the chance to betray them. Sia expressed her utmost respect for this senior who had such a brilliant mind. Eating the Guardians' food while trying to brainwash the little blue man, Abin Su was indeed very courageous as a green light. As for Ching Enyu and the others, they will most likely still listen to Abin Su's orders. The old man said with uncertainty. Thea had her reservations about this. She could only see that they had gone crazy. Every time they caught someone, they would brainwash them. Even if Abin Su was resurrected now, he would still be brainwashed by them. However, those matters had little to do with her. After exchanging a few more words with the old man, she slowly walked into the mountain stream. Dilapidated, shabby, dark and damp. Some reptiles that Thea doesn't know crawl out from the cracks of the stones. Sensitive animals detect an intruder and are very dissatisfied that their peace is disturbed. A few reptiles try to attack, but they are immediately frightened by her and hide again. The ground wasn't very wide, but there were many marks made by sharp weapons. It could be seen that it was created by the lantern ring. Thea slowly walked inside according to the guidance of the emotional energy. When she reached the deepest part, she finally saw the true embodiment of the will of the world, the green light of compassion's total energy. What made her a little speechless was that this total energy was still in the shape of a rechargeable lantern. Except for the different color, it was exactly the same as the yellow light of compassion's total energy. Needless to say, this was created by Abin Su, who lacked artistic talent, imitating the green light of Our. Thea's mind was already filled with images of 7 different colored total energy in front of her, and the image of her loudly summoning Shenron. Thea carefully approached the total energy. The waves of brainwashing short waves that she imagined did not appear. Thea was even more certain of her judgment. This total energy was harmless to her. Qing Enyu and the others must have read the scriptures wrongly. Otherwise, how could such positive emotional energy have such a strong hostility and start a fight just because of a disagreement? Perhaps the red light core that controlled the wrath was just like this. Thinking of the purpose of her trip, she no longer hesitated. Without the green light of compassion, she could still communicate with the emotions of compassion. Drawing out the excited holy sword, Thea sank her mind into the spiritual world, searching for the compassion that belonged to her. Back then, she obtained the emotion of fear through a trick. After that, she gradually grasped and controlled this emotion in the process of continuously using it. First, she bore the fruit, then she planted it. The order was obviously reversed. Compassion was not an emotion that could be used in the same way. Generally speaking, compassion was not rare. As long as one had a kind heart, they would have compassion. Even the most evil people could occasionally do something to help the weak. The most obvious example was Qing Enyu and the others who were reading the scriptures wrongly. Helping someone when they met with misfortune was a form of compassion. However, it was different from courage and hope. Those two were extremely positive, while compassion was slightly darker. It had a premise, that was, it could only be pitied when someone else was unlucky. Otherwise, in a peaceful and harmonious environment, if a certain person sang a song of pity, who would you pity? Lunatic. Thea had never found her place. She definitely had the emotion of compassion, but she had not reached the level where she could use it. For the ordinary people on earth, she could be said to be loved by all. To exaggerate, she was like a god in the eyes of the world. Now, even if the president wanted to talk to her, he would need to be mentally prepared. It was not that she was repulsive, nor was it that she was difficult to communicate with. It was completely the difference in the level of life, which naturally made people revere her. However, she knew her own situation better than anyone else. No one knew better than her how many hardships Earth would suffer in the future. Pity others? Who would pity her? What virtue of loving the world? She had never felt that she had such a thing. She had always been searching for the compassion that she did not know where it was. Now, facing the total energy of compassion in the universe, and with the help of the Holy Sword, Thea felt that she might have been wrong before. Abin Su's idea of making the bad people good and letting them feel compassion was undoubtedly a crooked path. Sia's original idea of being merciful and delivering all living beings from torment was also biased. The target of compassion was not limited to intelligent life. Especially after seeing the will of the planet turn into the total energy of compassion, she was even more convinced of this point. With the help of the total energy, Thea jumped out of the fixed circle. Only then did she realize how narrow-minded she was before. She saw the grandeur in front of her. The whole world was wailing, and the world needed help. Not one person, one land, one planet, but the entire universe, the universe that had been ravaged, needed compassion. When she saw the boundless world, Thea was excited. She finally found her heart of compassion. Azure emotional energy gushed out from her body and from her spiritual world. Few people in the world could compare to her in the use of emotional energy. She just needed to learn a little and she was able to control this emotion. Chapter 522. Because her starting point or target was too big, the quality and quantity of this energy was also frighteningly high. Without the cooperation of the lantern ring, it was impossible for an ordinary person to control this energy. However, Thea had been playing with fear energy for several years. Her newborn compassion was quickly tamed by her, and the green lantern energy around her also made it very convenient for her to refine her compassion emotions. She began to refine her compassion, and later added this emotion into her gaze. In the future, other than scaring people with a single glance, she could also use her compassionate gaze to make them wish they were dead. The only pity was that this kind of emotional impact was closely related to the opponent's willpower. Those with strong willpower could be ignored, and those with weak willpower were definitely not experts. The sight attack was just a side effect. The biggest benefit it brought her was that she could finally control the sacred sword. She finally felt a little more comfortable. Using compassion to control the sword of victory and pledge was much stronger than fear. The disharmony between the two parties was significantly reduced, and the amount of light that could be carried per unit of time was increased by at least 30%. Feeling that her mission was completed, Thea was about to teleport away when she heard a soft voice in her heart. Who are you?" the voice asked carefully. "Huh?" Thea quickly stopped and asked who it was and where it was. That was impossible. Thea was still a little confident in her own strength. She was sure that there was not a single ghost in the area, so the one who talked to her was the lantern beast of the green lantern energy. She had dealt with the parallax monsters a few times, so she was quite knowledgeable. However, she did not expect the lantern beast to take the initiative to talk to her. Thea hesitated for a moment. It was difficult to determine the other party's emotions, but it did not have any malicious intent. She gently separated a part of her spirit to communicate with the other party. "You're the lantern beast. What's your name again?" "Let me think. Changed your name to Octopus." The lantern beasts were all manifestations of emotions. To a certain extent, they were terrifyingly simple. Under the projection of Thea's spirit, a medium-sized tentacle monster appeared in the huge green lantern energy. "No, it was an octopus. You know me. I've never seen an outsider. Are you the holder of the lantern ring?" Seeing that Thea did not answer, it asked again, "How's the outside world now? I have very little emotional energy here. Are you still here? You're not leaving, are you?" Thea fell into deep thought. Lantern beasts had no gender. If they were to be categorized according to their personalities, the parallax monster would be equivalent to a middle school boy who was cursing at the heavens and the earth, while the squishy zongzong octopus in front of her would be like a kindergarten loli. The amount of emotional energy and the length of time in the world really affected their respective personalities. Thea tried to answer. "Don't you know there are members of the Green Lantern Club outside? You have never seen the holder of the lantern ring?" The lantern beast waved its tentacles in confusion. "No one has ever spoken to me. There's a bad guy outside who often extracts emotional energy from me, but he can't see me." The octopus's tone was full of complaints. The bad guy it was talking about was the old man who led them here. In order to make the lantern ring, he must have extracted energy from the already small total energy. Thea even thought that the old man's hands were not nimble and his skills were mediocre. He must have wasted a lot of energy. The old man was just an ordinary person. He did not have a lantern ring or spirit. He had been guarding this place for many years and probably did not know about the existence of the lantern beasts. As for Abin Su, as a member of the Green Lantern Ring, it was even more unlikely that he would talk to it easily. Thea, who held the sacred sword, only talked to it after she manifested the emotion of compassion. Thea's original intention to go home and sleep was immediately extinguished. She saw the hope of controlling the Green Lantern tribe. The person who controlled the total energy could change the purpose of the lantern ring. For example, Senisto's initial selection criteria was to control fear. Later, he changed it to release fear. After Thea took over, he changed it back again. The yellow lantern ring was like this, so the green lantern ring should be no exception. Changing the settings of their lantern ring, compassion should not be brainwashing. It was too cruel and evil. No intelligent life could accept the change of their temperament and become a person with the so-called compassion emotion. Using a tough method to turn evil into good was simply an insult to the word justice. "Can I get the Green Lantern ring too?" Thea asked tentatively. "Yes, I can see your compassion. To be honest, you can stimulate the emotional energy without the lantern ring. You're really amazing. I can provide you with this energy, but I don't know how to make a lantern ring. I'm afraid you'll have to look for that little guy." The octopus kindly reminded her. Thea laughed. It was difficult for others to make a lantern ring. It was equivalent to a monopolized technology that was only circulated in a small circle. Unfortunately, she was one of those people. When Sinisto entrusted Kruger to the Yellow Lantern Corps, he included a lot of ring manufacturing technology and experience. Making a Green Lantern ring was a piece of cake for her. "Don't worry, it's just making a lantern ring. It's not difficult," Thea said confidently. Now that the Yellow Lantern Corps had regained its momentum, the Galactic Alliance's daily deals were enough to make the 300 people in the Corps happy. It was really hard for anyone to reject the huge amount of money thrown at them. The initial dissatisfaction from leaving Kruger had disappeared. There were definitely still bad people in the Corps, but aliens who did not love money and only wanted to destroy the world were still rare. The prospects of the Corps were good, so Thea naturally started to recruit new subordinates. Every now and then, she would make a few rings and throw them out. There were always a few talents. Although she wasn't as skilled as Sinisto, who could make thousands of rings in one go and reach the point of perfection, with the help of her powerful mental strength, the rings she made were all above standard. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were all top-notch. The octopus said with a tone that said, "You're bragging." She reached out and extracted a portion of the total energy of the lantern ring and began to make it. She made the tire, carved the internal circuit, connected it to the Green Lantern network, infused it with energy, and finally formed it. She had done this process dozens of times, which disappointed the lantern beasts who wanted to see her make a fool of herself. A sky blue lantern ring quickly circled around her. Intelligent creature locked. "Thea Quinn from Earth, you have an incomparably compassionate heart. Welcome to the Green Lantern tribe." When it came to reciting the oath, it was a little troublesome. The original oath was completely in the local language. If Thea did not want to roll her tongue and recite it, she would have to change the oath. In order to gain the right to speak, she certainly could not follow the routine of others. After thinking for a while, she wiped the original oath on the ring and replaced it with a new one. Thea softly recited, "The sins of half a life are hard to recount. Scatter the dust and sorrow of the sleeves. Now the sky is low and the trees are low in the wilderness. Bow down and finally find the way home." Chapter 523. The first two sentences of the oath were about the situation of the Green Lamp tribe. In the third sentence, Thea hoped that they could broaden their horizons. In the fourth sentence, she hoped that they could find true compassion, both for others and for themselves. The uniform of the Green Lamp tribe was as simple and plain as their symbol, and there was very little cloth. Thea looked at the uniform she was wearing, which could be used as a swimsuit on the beach. She was speechless and secretly made up her mind that she would not wear the green lamp ring unless something important happened. The general function of the green lamp ring was similar to that of the yellow lamp. Because she did not know how many rings it was, even if she was skilled in making rings, this ring was equivalent to the elite level. The special instantiation of the green lamp ring was nothing special, but the teleportation was very powerful. Thea felt that now she could directly teleport to the Wall of Origin, instead of spending a lot of effort to keep going through wormholes. Adding the teleportation skill of the green lamp ring to her magic, Thea's teleportation skill could be said to be unparalleled in the world, but it still needed some time to explore. The green lamp ring was also a healing ring. The power of compassion could be transformed through the lamp ring and could repair physical damage. In addition to the extraordinary white lamp ring, Thea felt that the blue lamp and the green lamp of the rainbow lamp ring each had a part of the healing function. Now that the green lamp could heal the body, the blue lamp could probably heal the mind. Although it was fundamentally different from magic healing, She could use other people's help to improve her healing skills. Learning from each other, she also made new progress in her healing skills. The remaining functions were illusory images and the ability to create illusions. Thea felt that this ring could be called the Ring of Enlightenment. Several major functions revolved around how to make the target suddenly wake up. Thea carefully avoided the brainwashing function, but the remaining functions were still skills to fool people, which made her a little speechless. She was also given a long cane of the green lamp tribe, which could absorb the rainbow light, store it, and shoot it out. It looked cool, but for Thea, this function could only be called a chicken rib. Sometimes it could be said to be useless, but sometimes it could be said to be useful, but there was no suitable place to use it. Generally speaking, the green lamp's ability was inclined to guide people to do good. The word change on the lantern beast fully illustrated this point. Its auxiliary function was good, but its combat power was mediocre. Thea communicated with the Changzong Cuttlebone and took back the energy of the lantern ring. Apart from her own lantern ring, the rest of the lantern ring went offline. With his supervision, the Green Lanterns all regained their sanity. These people were not good people. They were all criminals that Abin Su had captured from all over the universe. If they regained their sanity and attacked each other, the blame would definitely be placed on Thea. Thea doesn't have much time. She talks about life, ideals, and the future with the lowly for a while. With its limited support, Thea begins to adjust the settings of the light ring. Wearing the ring would cause people to be brainwashed. This function had a great impact on intelligent life. It was not an exaggeration to call it evil. This kind of forced emotion was not compassion at all. Just like what Superman's father said, they gave Superman the right to choose. Now, Thea also gives the members of the Lantern Ring the right to choose again. A simple dialogue box appears in the mind of each member. Thea directly uses her psychic power to bypass the language barrier and asks them if they still want to practice compassion. Even without the blessing of the Lantern Ring, the leader Qing Nu immediately makes her own judgment. She chooses to continue on the path of compassion. The rest of the people hesitated, and some gradually made up their minds. In the end, 103 members of the tribe all chose to continue wearing the green lantern. Thea is a little moved. Don't they know that their will is forcibly changed by the lantern ring? They are all not children. They all know that. But they still choose to continue on the previous path. From this, Thea sees the powerful tolerance of compassion. Well, I gave you the choice. This is your problem. Thea mutters to herself and continues to make adjustments. First of all, cancel the oath in the native language and change it to the common language. Their daily language was also changed to the common language. Many of these people were interstellar felons, so they actually knew the common language. However, to take care of their old habits, Sia still kept the adjective nu for them. After the adjustments are made, the energy of the lantern ring is returned to them. In the silent teleportation, 103 people all appeared in front of Thea. Qing Nu's attitude finally changed, but there is a trace of anger on her face. Outsider, you have no right to interfere with our lives. Thea looks at this group of people one by one. Some of them are glaring at her, some of them are avoiding her, and some of them have a complicated look in their eyes. They have already recovered from the frenzied brainwashing, but the powerful inertia makes them a little uncomfortable. The scenes of their lives before are still vivid in their minds. They used to be close like family, but now they have all recovered their sanity. They are all criminals, so they are a little afraid of each other. Thea does not feel guilty about Qing Nu's accusation. Isn't it just some estrangement between them? It's not a big deal. Without the help of the lantern ring, she stretched out her hand and set up a huge shadow illusion spell. She also added in her own modified version of a pipe dream, adjusted the flow of time in the spell, and poured in the emotion of fear. At the same time, she also divided a part of her mental strength into the cage. The fear emotion manifests countless monsters, and they rushed at the Green Lanterns like a tide. In the illusion, the Green Lanterns can only huddle together for warmth and help each other. As the intensity of the battle deepens, the estrangement quickly dissipates. In the process, Thea naturally became familiar with them. They finally reached a point where they can help each other, no longer forced by the light ring, but accepted each other from the bottom of their hearts. The bright light of compassion takes root and grows in the crowd. When their emotions converge, Thea's fear emotion is directly defeated. The cage breaks by itself, and everyone regains consciousness. Is this compassion? Someone reached out and touched the green energy in front of him. We've been on the wrong path for so many years. It is true. There is a world of difference between the compassion that exists between heaven and earth and the compassion that exists between heaven and earth. This group of people quickly discovered the subtle differences between their respective energies. Is this your true goal? Is this really compassion? Ching Enyu's body trembled with tears streaming down her face, and she asked with uncertainty. Thea has been secretly observing the actions of the first Green Lantern to wear the light ring. She had to admit that Abin Su's evil compassion method is quite effective. The original serial killer has been completely changed. Her heart is filled with remorse for her past sins. Others may be a little conflicted, but as the most powerful Green Lantern, the powerful energy has completely rewritten her body and soul. Thea nodded in response to her question. That's right, this is true compassion. Chapter 524. Actually, who could say for sure what true compassion was? Everyone had a different interpretation of the world and life. One person's honey was another person's arsenic. Forcefully using personal values to explain the truth of the universe was biased in itself. However, in order to control the Green Lanterns, Thea gave them the right to choose. She showed them a broader and more tolerant compassion. She was quite proud of it. Abin Su was already dead. Regardless of whether his views were right or wrong, they were all in the past and should be replaced by more rational and healthy emotions. The Green Lanterns paid their respects to Thea according to their tribe's etiquette. Thea accepted it calmly. She deserved it, so there was nothing to be embarrassed about. In a way, she had also liberated the Green Lantern Corps, allowing them to embark on a broader and more positive path. Is this Abin Su's idea? The elusive short old man jumped out of the shade and pointed at the Green Lanterns as he asked Thea. Thea felt a bit guilty towards this old man who had never left his own planet and wanted to rebel against the little blue men just because of friendship. However, she soon realized that it was her compassion that was affecting her, so she suppressed her guilt and insisted. That's right, this is indeed Abin Su's idea. This is his latest realization. The old man was enlightened and stood to the side happily. Thea actually wanted to ask the old man's name, but seeing that he had no intention of introducing himself, she could only give up. She waited for a while and waited for the Green Lanterns to regain their composure before speaking. Brothers and sisters, I've brought you the true compassion of the Green Lanterns. Next, there's something I need you to witness. They had been together for many days in the illusion, so no one objected to her calling them brothers and sisters. Thea then turned around to communicate with the Green Lantern's energy source. This was the first time they had seen such a huge energy source. They didn't know what was going on, so they could only watch in silence. At this time, Thea used her psychic power to communicate with the Green Lantern Beast. She wanted to ask for something from the lowly Lantern Beast. Book. I don't have any books here. The Lantern Beast in the mental world was a bit confused. A few tentacles scratched its head as it answered. Definitely. Maybe it wasn't there before, but when I mentioned the book, it must have been there. If I'm not mistaken, it should be in your energy source. Thea was very sure that the Green Lantern had the Book of Aura, the Yellow Lantern had the Book of Parallax, the Black Lantern had the Book of Death, and the Green Lantern definitely had it as well. However, Abin Su, the creator of the Lantern Ring, did not know about this secret. His level was not high enough to establish his own Lantern Ring, and he did not dare come into contact with the Lantern Beasts. He knew about the Book of Our of the Green Lantern Ring, but he definitely did not know that each Lantern Ring had a book. Thea had been in possession of the Parallax Book for a long time and had communicated with the Parallax monsters several times. She knew these rules like the back of her hand. Yes, there must be. Let's look around. Thea coaxed the Cuttlebone like a child. It was rare for the lowly Lantern Beast to meet someone who was willing to chat with it, so it was not unhappy. In its eyes, this might be a game, so it looked very serious. Soon, the lowly lantern beast found something new. It asked in an uncertain tone, "Is this the book you were talking about?" Thea's spiritual power was a little slow in the emotion of pity. It took her a while to find the cuttlebone and scan what it found. It was square and could be used as a shield or a table. Such a thick thing. Yes, this must be the Book of the Green Lantern that did not appear in the original time and space. She tricked the lantern beast to help her move it out. The other Green Lanterns did not know what she was doing. They only saw Thea lowering her head for a few minutes, and then there was a flash of energy. In the flash, a big blue book appeared in Thea's hand. Thea looked at it carefully. It was similar to the Book of Parallax, but the Book of Parallax could slow down the target. This book's function was healing. As long as the book was present, it would heal the surrounding allies every minute until the energy in the book was exhausted. A powerful battlefield halo? Thea glanced at it. The rest of the functions were almost the same. Registering information and recording all kinds of events. She was most familiar with registering information. Taking advantage of the fact that there was no name in the book, she wrote her name on the first line. Thea did not want to hold the book by herself. It was one of the rules that the book could not be held by the same person as the leader of the army. Now that she was in control of the Yellow Lantern, the Book of Parallax was handed to Fiora. This book was born from Nu, so its name should be the Book of Nu Ching Nu. Are you willing to hold this book? This was Thea's blatant scheme. If she wanted the position of the leader, she couldn't avoid Ching Nu. Her intention was self-evident when she took out the book after so much effort. The first blue lantern contained a lot of information. Thea guessed that Ching Nu knew that she could not have both the leader and the book. She held the book with both hands and looked at Ching Nu calmly. Ching Nu's moral character had become like a saint, but this did not mean that she had become stupid. Even when she was brainwashed in the original timeline, her intelligence still allowed her to deal with the Seven Lantern Corps. She played Hal Jordan and the others like a fool. Now that the brainwashing effect was gone, her thinking was more rational and deeper. Where will you lead the Blue Lantern? Ching Nu walked up to Thea, but she did not take the book. Instead, she asked in a low voice. Thea knew that Ching Nu was still doubtful. I will lead the Blue Lantern out of the dark night. This is my promise. The Blue Lantern should expand the scope of recruitment. Even the kind-hearted need mercy. Seeing that Ching Nu still had not made up her mind, Thea added, the Blue Lantern should abandon its principle of seclusion. More and more people will join this big family. In Abin Su's era, the Blue Lantern was a secret force he established to counterattack the main planet of Aurora. Of course, he had to adhere to the principle of seclusion. Now, it was unnecessary. It could be said that the Guardians were open-minded and had a good vision. They even turned a blind eye to the Yellow Lantern, so they would not make things difficult for the Blue Lantern, who was like a saint. Even if they met the Green Lanterns in the universe, they would not make things difficult for the merciful Blue Lantern. They might even help him. As for whether the Guardians would dig up Abin Su's grave if they knew about the existence of such a secret force, Thea felt that it was unlikely. The little blue men had been stripped of their emotions. They did not know what anger was. If you praised them, they would not be happy. If you scolded them, they would not be angry. What's more, even if they dug up Abin Su's grave, it would have nothing to do with Thea. Ching Nu was moved by the idea of strengthening the Blue Lantern. She knew her own family well. The Blue Lantern tribe used to be notorious criminals with a bad reputation. If they were put in the universe, it would be hard to say if they would not be hunted down. How could you explain that you have changed? Who would believe that? As their leader, Ching Nu did not dare to let them appear in front of others. But to say that she did not want to strengthen the Blue Lantern was an insult to Ching Nu. She thought about it day and night. She even thought about it in her dreams. Chapter 525. However, she was unable to bear the consequences. The Green Lantern tribe had few members and low combat power. Her thin shoulders could not withstand all kinds of unpredictable risks. That was why, under her restraint, he continued to pursue the principle of hiding from the world. Now that she met Thea, it gave her a glimmer of hope. Regardless of whether Thea made a promise blindly or not, the fact that she could fight more than 30 people like it was child's play proved that this woman was very good at fighting and her combat power was very strong. Although she had turned over a new leaf today, Qing Enyu still had the experience of being a bad person. Whether an organization's leader could fight or not determined the lifespan of the organization. This rule was an ironclad rule on most planets. The leader's fist determined how far the organization could go. Qing Enyu finally made up her mind and reached out to take the Book of Nous. Leading more than 100 people did not have much power, so she gave up happily. In return, Qing Enyu pulled Thea and said loudly, "Thea Quinn is our sister. She can inherit the position of leader of the Green Lantern tribe." In the previous battle in the illusion, everyone knew her name, so no one asked Thea who she was. She was still met with silence from the crowd. Thea sighed inwardly. She still had to rely on her fists to speak. As the leader of the Green Lantern tribe, it was definitely not appropriate to take out 120 yellow lantern rings. It was meaningless to use other forces to suppress them. Thea had no choice but to put on the green ring and change into the somewhat shameful clothes. The clothes were made of so little material that it made one's hair stand on end. The upper part of the clothes was just a small singlet that barely covered the indescribable parts. Her entire lower abdomen, arms, and back were exposed. The lower part was even more exaggerated. A pair of briefs with 2 long curtains tied at the front and back. Other than that, there was nothing else. Compared to the tight clothes on the Green Lantern and Yellow Lantern tribe, the Green Lantern tribe style was simple to the extreme. Not to mention the exposed thighs, there was not even a pair of shoes. Even Thea wanted to dig up a Bean Sue's grave with such a simple outfit. You really are using the Green Lantern tribe as cannon fodder. You don't even have decent clothes. However, clothes were different from rings. Once set, they could not be changed. Thea could only fight in this attire. Fortunately, she had the ability to fly. She hovered half a meter above the ground and said to everyone, "Come at me together. Let me teach you how to fight between the rings of light." After that, she conjured a green giant and entered it, waiting for everyone to make the first move. Knowing that she was going to fight 100 people by herself, the Green Lanterns couldn't accept it. "You were indeed very powerful before, but if you don't use the power of the thunderstorm and only rely on the lantern ring, can you fight 100 of us by yourself?" A few hot-tempered people immediately began to attack. Under their lead, the rest of the people also began to attack. Thea sneered. She could see that these people were criminals from the previous universe. They were strong and weak, and each of them had some special abilities. Now that they saw that Thea had given up on her ability and used the ring to speak, they made the same choice. These guys lived in seclusion. They were not even as good as the Green Lantern recruits when it came to the usage of the rings of light. In addition, the Green Lanterns themselves didn't have much attack power. Their rings were now like toys in Thea's eyes. After living in seclusion for a long time, they were extremely inexperienced in fighting between the rings of light. Not only did they not cooperate with each other, but their attacks were also extremely messy. There were even instances where they collided with each other. Thea's lantern ring was not as good as Qing Enyu's, there was no doubt about that. However, it was still better than these guys in front of her. Coupled with her rich experience in fighting with the rings of light, her giant rushed into the crowd and crushed them. Her rich experience made her like a martial arts master beating ordinary people. The difference in physical fitness was not big, but the difference in experience and skill was like heaven and earth. Thea could conjure all kinds of legendary creatures and high-tech weapons at will. These Green Lanterns had lived in seclusion for a long time. They were almost lacking in imagination. They were a group of criminals before, so their imagination was very limited. The hammer and chain that they conjured were like toys to Thea. The Green Lanterns were easily knocked to the ground by her. Thea stopped conjuring and gestured to Qing Enyu. The other party immediately took out the Book of Enyu. An endless amount of emotional energy began to heal the injuries of these people. The Green Lanterns slowly stood up. Their expressions were not very good. Thea was too lazy to play any tricks. She pointed out the shortcomings of the Green Lanterns one by one. Everyone was speechless. They all lowered their heads, acknowledging the change of leader. Thea stayed on this planet for the next few days. She taught everyone how to use the rings of light. The rest of the time, she discussed various matters with Qing Enyu. From her explanation, Qing Enyu learned that they had been working as temporary workers all this time. Without a register, many of the things they did were actually meaningless, especially when the green lamp's energy source was in a state where it could only be used. Thea could not stay here for long. She also brought Qing Enyu to see the Green Lantern cuttlefish. Unlike Thea, who was coaxing the Green Lantern beasts like children, Qing Enyu trembled in fear when she saw the Green Lantern cuttlefish. The Green Lantern cuttlefish thought that someone had come to play with it again. However, Qing Enyu's face turned pale. This made it very unhappy. This made Thea even more precious. She only understood this point after the event. She was a demigod. In terms of life level, there was not much difference between her and the Green Lantern beasts. She also knew the Green Lantern beast, Parallax. Naturally, she had no qualms about meeting the Green Lantern cuttlefish. Qing Enyu was just an ordinary person. No matter how capable or intelligent she was, she could not change this fact. In the face of the Green Lantern cuttlefish made of pure energy, she could barely manage to greet it. Thea did not make things difficult for her. After all, she had introduced the Green Lantern cuttlefish to her. There was nothing she could do if she was trembling in fear. The Green Lantern cuttlefish was on the right track. The old man named Natomo was the happiest. He seemed to have put down a heavy burden. Except for occasionally mentioning why Abin Su did not come back to see him, he was happy the rest of the time. Another happy person was the Green Lantern cuttlefish. Previously, the Green Lantern cuttlefish did not go through the registration procedure. Although they generated a huge amount of compassion energy every day, the Green Lantern cuttlefish could not touch the energy at all because of the wrong procedure. From time to time, Natomo would come to the Green Lantern cuttlefish to draw energy from it. It was very uncomfortable for the Green Lantern cuttlefish. Now that everything was standardized, the Green Lantern cuttlefish was finally able to enjoy the benefits it deserved. A large amount of compassion energy was injected into the Green Lantern cuttlefish every day. The Green Lantern cuttlefish was so happy that it almost jumped out. In addition, Thea, who was good at coaxing children, would chat with it from time to time. The Green Lantern cuttlefish felt that these days were the happiest days for it. Thea was not idle either. She began to reorganize the Lantern cuttlefish. The ability of instantiation was the foundation of everything. This was something that everyone needed to learn. Transmission was a unique skill of the Green Lantern cuttlefish, so she could not give up on it. She opened several literacy classes, beginner classes, and advanced classes. Chapter 526. After learning for a period of time, she sent out a few decent fighters to do propaganda. There were a lot of bad guys in the yellow lamp, so they had to use the neutral camp as a cover. The green lamp didn't have this problem at all. They openly preached all kinds of purposes, and when they met the right people, they would send them back with a ring to participate in professional training. Qing Enyu's paranoia was indeed serious. At first, she was worried for a few days, as if countless aliens would jump out and annihilate them in the next second. Later, when a few tribe members returned and told her about the situation outside, she realized that she was overthinking. Thea stayed for half a month, and when she felt that everything was on the right track, she said goodbye to everyone and returned to Earth. Learning from the green lamp's technique, her teleportation technique had reached a new level, and the feeling of being able to travel across the universe in an instant made her feel very comfortable. Compassion could only be said to be useful now, but it would take a while to be able to use it as freely as fear. The affairs on Earth were completely on track, but the 6 mechs working at the same time had exceeded the maximum production capacity of the Quinn Group. After all, they were a group, not a country. Several CEOs obtained Thea's consent and gradually sold some of the simple construction work to other groups. A conservative estimate was that so far, there were at least 1 million construction workers involved in this manufacturing project. Thea was just trying to maintain the lead, and making money was really secondary to her. Just as she was preparing for the next stage of the research, Diana came to her. "Are you going on a trip?" In the apartment in London, Thea looked at Diana, who was packing, and asked a little strangely. "I'm not sure, but I have a feeling that after I took off the silver bracelet on Doomsday last time, there seemed to be some changes in my body." Diana repeatedly described, but she didn't know how to explain it, so her words were very vague. Thea asked a few more questions, but Diana's situation was more like some kind of whim. She had never seen this kind of situation before, so naturally, she couldn't give any reasonable suggestions. "Do you feel some kind of call?" Thea's heart skipped a beat, and she asked. "I'm not sure, but a very vague feeling seems to be urging me to look for something." The Valkyrie had never been so confused before. She sat on the bed with her arms wrapped around her knees. Now that even Thea, who had always been resourceful, had no idea what to do, she felt even more lost. Thea could not say that she had no clue at all. She felt that Diana was most likely going to come into contact with the source. No one could be certain about such a conceptual thing. Her little advantage of being a prophet was of no help in this kind of problem. She did not even dare to say too much in order not to interfere with Diana's choice. Diana, who was originally at the peak of the demigod realm, might have vaguely sensed something in the process of removing the protective silver bracelet, which led to today's conversation. Diana should have taken off the silver bracelet during the battle with the Firstborn. Perhaps she also had some enlightenment at that time. Unfortunately, fate played a joke on her. Diana accidentally killed Ars and inherited his position as the god of war. This incident cut off her path to becoming a new god and made her unable to progress further. Now, by chance, she had reached the peak, but without Ars's interference, Diana's future was almost bright. Thea naturally would not stop her. She originally wanted to remind her of the power of the Wall of Origin, but after learning that her premonition was still on Earth, Thea could only keep quiet. There was a wild source on Earth. This kind of intangible and conceptual thing was really beyond her understanding. The young miss had never seen pork, nor had she seen a pig walk. She could only watch as Diana dressed up as a traveler and embarked on her own path of search. She could only say that she was envious of Diana. Diana was born with a max level and could become a god with just a little practice. She was full of the aura of the child of destiny. However, everyone had their own fate. Everyone had different starting points and experiences, so it was really hard to say who was more comfortable. She felt that Diana could level up by going sightseeing. Perhaps others were also envious of her ability to rely on deceiving ordinary people to gather the power of all living beings to forcibly obtain the source. Diana went on to find her doubts with a sense of holiness. Thea naturally could not disturb her every now and then. At such a critical moment, her state of mind must not be destroyed. She returned to the metropolis with some annoyance. Rose Wilson, the daughter of the Nell, who was now in charge of the Earth's intelligence network, brought her great news. The personnel planted in Dr. Savannah's expedition team sent news that the doctor, who was born in a wealthy family and loved archaeology more than money, seemed to have made a major breakthrough. 45 miles north of Baghdad, they seem to have found a place that is very similar to the historical record, Ross Wilson reported respectfully. "Ha." Thea, who had always been a little gloomy in front of her subordinates, could no longer control her emotions and laughed happily. "Tell your father that Target B has appeared. Ask him to bring people back to Earth quickly." Thea did not explain to Rose Wilson and ordered her to prepare. Rose Wilson bowed her head and left. Thea was very excited. Target A, Shazam; Target B, Black Adam. She had worked hard for many years and finally waited for this day. She was no longer the ignorant girl. Thea was very clear that as long as she could obtain the power of either of these two people, she could reach the peak of demigod. She was originally a little annoyed by Diana's advancement, but she immediately felt better. This had nothing to do with love. It was completely a way for two women with the same character to get along. To put it in a tacky way, they were a match on another level. Their door was power and life level. 100 years ago, when they first met on Paradise Island, Thea was strong and Diana was weak. After that, the Valkyrie trained hard for 100 years, while Thea did not make any progress. The two of them were strong and weak. In recent years, Thea had been catching up head-on, and the two of them were tied. Thea even regained the upper hand with her various means. In the Battle of Doomsday, Diana chose to stake it all on one throw. It was not without the intention of climbing to the top. She thought that she would be under Diana for a short time, but she did not expect that fate would favor her. After absorbing Black Adam, she would go to the Wall of Origin to hook up with the Origin. Perhaps Thea could become a god before Diana. This was the reason for her joy. In the eyes of outsiders, the two of them were very sick, but this was how they got along. They were lovers and opponents, and the kind of opponents for life. In the original spacetime, Diana had abandoned Steve Trevor. This was a result of the great difference in strength between the two of them. There was no right or wrong, but there was no common language between them. An elephant might be friends with an ant, but if it stayed in the ant hole for a long time, neither of them could bear it. Thea suppressed the ecstasy in her heart. She knew that there was still a tough battle to fight. Black Adam was not as gullible as Billy Batson. Chapter 527. Black Adam was an adult, which meant that words would not work on him. Although he also shouted Shazam to gain power, unlike Billy Batson who got his power from the Greek gods, his power came from the Egyptian gods. Just like how Thea pursued the balanced development of the 6 types of magic, Shazam's ritual was to gain the power of the 6 gods to balance the user's body. Su's endurance, Horus' agility, Amon's strength, and so on. That's right, one of the 6 divine powers of Black Adam was Thea's old friend Horus. This was also the main reason why she was confident in attacking him. After all, she did not want to kill him, but capture him and then slowly absorb his divine power. This made the difficulty of the battle increased by 2 levels. Death Knell came back quickly, and Midnight Daddy came along with him. As the only mage under Thea, he would be of great help in the upcoming battle. Thea ordered Death Knell to mobilize manpower everywhere. There were too many satellites in the sky above Iraq, and many of her subordinates could not be exposed. The people on Earth were only responsible for breaking the seal. As long as Black Adam was summoned, they would immediately pack up and teleport away. The actual battlefield was in outer space, and many of her subordinates were waiting on the other side. Black Adam, who had been sealed for 1,000 years, would probably leave Earth before he could understand what was going on. The process after that was self-evident. Thea's side would definitely win. Black Adam could be dragged away by force, but Shyvana's archaeological team was not suitable to do so. The archaeological team also hired a lot of mercenaries. In order to not expose her own traces, Thea was prepared to use firearms to deal with these people. In the chaos of Baghdad, who would know who killed them? Not long after, they met up with Death Knell's subordinates. Thea, whose teleportation spell had reached a new level, directly teleported away with dozens of people. In a valley 45 miles northwest of Baghdad, Dr. Shyvana, who was in his 50s, was excitedly strolling around the campsite. He was also a rich baldy, but his focus was completely different from Luther's. Exploring the mysterious power had been his long-cherished wish for many years. For this wish, he could endure the ridicule of others and the ridicule of his family. This was because he always believed that there was a mysterious power in this world. For this reason, he taught himself hundreds of ancient languages and constantly appeared in dangerous places all over the world, seeking the truth of the world from ancient books. 3 years ago, through an unknown channel, he had heard of the legend of Black Adam, and the story of how this powerful magus rose from a slave to a king. Dr. Shyvana didn't know that this was information that Thea had purposely revealed to him. He studied the ancient literature tirelessly and searched for clues in countless tombs. Finally, he made a major breakthrough today. He led his subordinates and spent several months in this faraway country just to prove that his judgment was correct. "Doctor, you're right. We found something." Dr. Shyvana could still recall the shock and admiration that came from the bottom of his heart when his subordinates finally saw the results of his stubbornness. He didn't order them to dig immediately. Instead, he returned to the campsite to look for the various clues he had collected over the years. He was like an examinee who was about to enter the exam. He kept looking at the parchment and rubbing that he could memorize. Finally, he calmed down. Thinking that his life's goal was right in front of him, he excitedly walked out of the campsite and entered a nearby cave. He quickly climbed up the ladder to the bottom. Even though he was already in his 50s and had been running in the mountains for many years, his body was still strong and healthy. "Gregory, how is it?" he asked his proud disciple. Even his proud disciple was already in his 30s. Gregory, who had a beautiful beard and a face full of hardships, happily replied, "Doctor, we accidentally dug out this door when we were digging. It's really incredible. The infrasound didn't detect this place at all." The bald Dr. Savannah suppressed his excited heart. He felt that his life's goal was right in front of him. He pushed his assistant to the side and personally took a small brush to clean the dust on the door. As the #1 archaeologist in the world, he found the location very accurately and quickly cleaned out a symbol. A simple but dignified symbol appeared on the door. "I." The bald Dr. carefully compared it to what he knew. This symbol was very abstract. Many races worshipped the eye, so he couldn't determine what it meant at the moment. Everyone was encouraged by his personal appearance, and the cleaning work began to speed up. Soon, half of the stone door appeared in front of everyone. There was an eye on one side of the door, and a lightning symbol on the other side. The two of them faced each other, and there were some blurry words at the top. Such ancient words. I only know a few letters. This must be Black Adam's tomb. He must be. Dr. Savannah was so excited that he was about to explode. It seemed like he was talking to others, but it also seemed like he was talking to himself. The people who knew his habits didn't disturb him. He also knew that they wouldn't respond, but at this moment, he couldn't express his joy without saying something. Just when he thought that no one would respond to him, something unexpected happened. A clear female voice said, "Doctor, you're right. This must be Black Adam's tomb." With Death Knell's men pointing out the location, Miss Thea opened the sky blue teleportation circle and directly arrived here. Now, not only was Death Knell recruiting a large number of mercenaries under Thea, Midnight, who was also very creative, wasn't satisfied with opening a tavern as a middleman. Realizing that he needed help, he found Mr. E of the Cold Flame Vatican. He told Mr. E that there were resources everywhere in the outer space, and precious magic materials were piled up like garbage. Attracted by the beautiful scene described by Midnight, both sides immediately turned hostility into friendship. Mr. E led the Vatican and directly became Thea's subordinate. However, Midnight didn't lie to him. Many magic materials that were extremely rare on Earth were everywhere in the outer space. Like a mouse that fell into a rice bowl, Mr. E, who was limited by the lack of resources, was so happy that he couldn't sleep. This time, when he heard that Thea had a big operation, he volunteered to help. Considering that they were also magicians, Thea also brought them along, so they arrived a little later than expected. "Dr. Quinn, you're here?" The bald Dr. Savannah naturally knew Thea. He even watched the video of the metropolis more than 10 times because he was interested in the mysterious power. He also heard some information from the higher-ups. Many people thought that the magic Thea cast on Doomsday was a kind of technological ray. Magic itself was declining, and it deliberately avoided the world. Many people in power, including Dr. Savannah, who was a fanatic supernatural enthusiast, didn't realize that magic was around. Perhaps in Dr. Savannah's subconscious mind, magic should be incomparably noble and had long disappeared in the long river of time. How could such a legendary thing still exist? How could it be around him? Chapter 528. He was even looking forward to spending his entire life digging for evidence. If magic was right beside him, then what was the point of studying and researching for the past few decades? Subconsciously, Savannah had been ignoring more and more supernatural phenomena. He didn't want his life's pursuit to be in vain, but he didn't want to become a joke either. However, no matter what he thought before, the moment Thea teleported over, his persistence and belief collapsed. "Me? Of course I'm here to look for Black Adam," Thea said with a warm smile. "How did it become like this?" Dr. Savannah's bald head was covered in a thin layer of sweat. He wasn't a good person at all. When he heard the gunshots from the camp, it went without saying what it meant. Although Thea was wearing a jacket with her hands in her pockets and smiling warmly, Dr. Savannah had once mocked her for being a righteous person who lacked brains. Now, he didn't think so, especially when he saw the murderous Death Knell and the punk-dressed Daddy Midnight. These two didn't look like righteous people at all. However, what shocked him even more was that Mr. E asked Thea with a ferocious look, "Master, should we kill them?" After knowing that Mr. E had joined her, Thea healed his eyes after a short examination. She also picked out a simple meditation technique from Morgan Le Fay and taught it to him. She also told him not to practice those messy meditation techniques in the future. Mr. E, who was eager to show his loyalty, looked at Savannah gloomily, as if he was looking at a pig or a sheep. Thea thought for a moment. The doctor has worked hard and contributed greatly. Let's keep them for now. Doctor, your lifelong wish is here. Why stop? Continue. It was useless to say anything at this point. Dr. Savannah also had the spirit of someone who could die in the evening. He turned around and signaled for them to continue digging. He had this determination, but the others didn't. They were all workers and archaeologists, not warriors. They didn't have the ability to resist even if they wanted to. Especially when the people around Thea didn't look like good people, they didn't dare to resist. Let them speed up. Thea ordered Daddy Midnight under Savannah's puzzled gaze. The voodoo warlock then took out 2 pieces of beast bones and started striking them slowly and rhythmically. Then, Dr. Savannah realized that his students and assistants were all in a daze as they started to clean the door. Magic. Shivana's mind was in turmoil. He was happy, excited, powerless, and confused. All the joys and sorrows of the past flashed before his eyes. There really was magic in this world. He was a little dazed. It took him a long time to come back to his senses. In such a short time, the door had been cleaned up. His student assistants all walked out with wooden expressions. This scene was incomparably horrifying. How are you going to deal with me? He could tell that Thea was the leader, and he had talked to her a few times in the outside world, so he asked cautiously, "Don't worry, I didn't kill your assistants. They will forget what happened today when they wake up. As for you, although you are not a good person, you are not a bad person either. Later on, I will erase your memory of today. When you wake up tomorrow, you will continue to look for Black Adam." Thea raised a finger and said with assurance. Nowadays, she didn't kill innocent people easily. The camp in the outside world was full of mercenaries. There were many people from various forces, so they had to be cleaned up. However, the people in front of her were all ordinary people. Some of them were even students. Although they came to Iraq to dig up other people's relics, they didn't deserve to die. Hearing that he was still alive, Savannah breathed a sigh of relief. After the crisis of life and death, the ideal in his heart emerged again. Don't erase my memory yet. I want to go in and take a look. After saying that, he pointed at the door. In the original space-time, there seemed to be a secret room behind the door. Thea didn't know if Black Adam would come out if she opened it a few years earlier. After thinking about it, she decided to bring the doctor along as insurance. You also know magic? Savannah deliberately stayed away from the other murderous guys and stood beside Thea. Seeing her staring at the door, he couldn't help but ask curiously. Yes. Thea answered casually. Her mind was focused on observing the door. In the original space-time, the bald doctor used a pry bar to force open the door. In her opinion, it was a joke. The magic door in front of her didn't match the pry bar at all. Savannah wanted to ask again, but Thea gave him a cold stare. He was so scared that he didn't dare to say anything. Then, he saw a scene that shattered his worldview. Thea kept gathering all kinds of energy balls in her hand and threw them at the door. It's very simple. After checking it a few times, Thea secretly sneered at the old Shazon. Maybe he was very strong, but unfortunately, he didn't have a brain. This door could be described as simple to a magician. The magic he used to seal Black Adam was simple and brainless. Maybe in the era when magic was not popular, He thought that a lightning magic would be able to stop everyone. Thea injected a ball of lightning magic into the symbol on the left eye. The symbol quickly turned into the same lightning symbol as the one on the right. The heavy stone door slowly opened. A winding stone staircase appeared behind the door. Sia took the lead and walked in. Savannah immediately followed, and Death Knell and the rest walked at the back. After walking for half an hour, they finally reached the bottom. Dr. Savannah's equipment was left at the top, but he estimated that they were already deep underground. The space at the bottom wasn't big. There was only a hall connected to the stone staircase. There were 2 main rooms on the east and west sides. The 2 main rooms were filled with rare statues and piles of gemstones. However, Thea and the rest ignored the treasures and stood in front of a wall to observe silently. Dr. Savannah was also a rich man. Especially now that his life was hanging by a thread, no matter how good the treasures were, they weren't worth his attention. Besides, he had raided countless tombs, so he could guess that the treasures on the 2 sides were probably some kind of trick. This trick was too lame, and there was nothing new about it. When he saw Thea and the rest staring at a wall, how could he not know that there was a mystery behind it? He walked closer to take a look, but unfortunately, he couldn't find any clues. Thea was in a very good mood today, and a wicked idea popped up in her mind. She looked at Dr. Savannah, who was scratching his ears and cheeks with a faint smile. "What? Do you want to see the secret here too? Wasn't this nonsense?" Usually, if someone spoke to him like this, Dr. Savannah would spit in his face. However, he didn't dare to do so now. However, due to his curiosity, he still nodded stiffly. Eye of spirit vision. Thea stretched out her hand and swiped in front of his eyes. Savannah felt as if a valve had been opened in his mind, and countless illusions suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. Fortunately, this person's willpower wasn't bad. He quickly focused his attention on the stone wall. This time, he finally knew what Thea and the rest were looking at. He saw that the originally empty stone wall was now filled with symbols and pictures of various races and civilizations. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.